Hello survivors and welcome to Toasty, a Mortal Kombat podcast by Resident Evil fans for Resident Evil fans. This is First Aid Spray bonus episode 12 and we're serving up 2 back-to-back rounds of brutality as we look at the 1990s and 2020s films, both titled Mortal Kombat. I'm your host Cyrax, see what I did there, and joining me on the character selection screen this week, despite Charisma Saving Show and regular Dark Souls streams, I'm happy to report that I didn't even have to use an authoritative "get over here" to make sure he made it on time. It's Moist Owlet, aka James.
Let's dance.
Sub-Zero's powers have no effect on the man who lives in minus 20 Celsius weather. It's Boy Wonder Adam.
He's just a normal citizen over here.
He's riding high on cheap energy drinks. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Right. Hello.
And our special guest returning to the show for this episode, he's killing dudes with button inputs. It's Mr. KDB, aka Kelsey.
KDB wins.
The subject of this bonus episode, unlike all others, was not voted on by our Patreon backers, but that is usually the way things go. Support the show now to not only help keep us afloat, but also to create new content. Select what that content is and hear it a month before everyone else. Tiers begin at just $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/FASprayPod for the full breakdown. So yeah, this is a bit of a surprise episode. This one wasn't on a bonus poll. It literally comes down to I saw the trailer for the new Mortal Kombat film and was like, yo, this is sick, we need to cover it. And since Film Club episodes tend to be 2 movies, Adam suggested we look at the 1995 original as well, which happily gives us full rights to completely blaze past Annihilation and never discuss it again, which is probably what it deserves by the sounds of it. So, yes, we'll be talking about the 1995 Mortal Kombat film first, then the 2021 version, which is just released as of the time of recording yesterday in certain places of the world. And that will be broken up by a musical performance, of course, the classic Mortal Kombat theme covered by BlackWater Studios. It's very good. It's very high energy. If this doesn't make you want to move, then I don't know what's wrong with you. But check out their channel. There's loads of cool video game covers and just general metal covers and stuff on there. You're probably going to find something you like. So link is in the description for BlackWater Studios. Thank you to them. Alright, so let's start with the 90s Mortal Kombat film, which was produced immediately after the second Mortal Kombat game and released in the same year as Mortal Kombat 3 due to the series' massive and quite instant popularity. The budget for the film was $18 million and it was released in August of 95 after being pushed back from May since studios thought that it would be a summer success, and they were correct as it spent several weeks at number 1. And at the time was the second biggest August movie release ever after 1993's The Fugitive. It was also the most successful video game adaptation, monetarily speaking, for a long time, up until recent films like Detective Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog. It returned $73 million in its first 3 weeks and ended with a box office of $124 million, which, adjusted for inflation, is about $176 million. It currently has a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes and an aggregate score of 56 out of 100 on Metacritic. So, first question is always, what was your first experience with, let's kind of focus on the film, but I guess in terms of just general Mortal Kombat, you know, how were you introduced to the series? Kelsey, since you're the guest, what was your introduction to Mortal Kombat in general and the film?
So the franchise itself would have been on the Mega Drive back when I was a wee one. So I guess that was the first game. I think I must have been about 8 or 9 years old or something like that. And that was the first time I'd ever seen Mortal Kombat. And I'm pretty sure it would have been like a friend of mine just bringing the game round to play on the Mega Drive. And that's how I was kind of first exposed to it. And I always preferred it to like Street Fighter. I think when I was a kid, I was really into horror and things like that, and it had that sort of thing about it, that edginess, and so it was always my preferred game. It was probably the first fighting game I played like at length, you know, where you kind of go to the point of learning all the combos and the fatalities and things like that. So certainly that was where I became aware of the franchise, and then the film I can remember was kind of very similar to lots of films at that time, and it was just going to the video rental shop and seeing it there and renting it and taking it home and watching it. And again, so that would have been probably the year it came out, I suppose. And
Nice.
It's weird because I saw it then, and I think I saw it again probably in maybe my mid-20s or something like that. But even up until this week, I watched it because I watched the 95 version again this week. And in my mind, I've always had it kind of crossover with the Street Fighter movie. And I could have actually bet my life that Kylie Minogue was in Mortal Kombat, the film, snapping the dude's neck. That was or that was in Street Fighter. I just had these moments crossing over.
Yeah.
And then I was watching it this week like, oh no, I guess that wasn't Street Fighter. But yeah, so both the franchise itself and the movie sort of way back when in the 90s was, yeah, that's how I kind of discovered it.
Cool. James, what was your first interactions with the Mortal Kombat series?
So my my second console ever was a Mega Drive. My first one was a SNES, I think, and then I got a Mega Drive, and I got this game gifted to me. It was sent to me. Unfortunately, I didn't have my Mega Drive for very long, so I didn't get to play the game very much. But like that was pretty much my first experience of the game. In terms of the movie, I didn't get to watch this movie till late 90s, early noughties, I feel like, because even though my mother and my parents, they, were very, yeah, you can watch Alien and Aliens, that's cool, but this Mortal Kombat seems a bit too violent, which is so strange. So like I didn't actually get to play it until later on, and I didn't get to even watch the movie properly until later on either. But I really liked the movie back then. I remember really enjoying it. Going back on it as an older person is it's interesting, the lines in it and stuff. But I think it was just like kiddish wonder, because that's who they were pretty much like that's the demographic they were going for, I feel like.
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially with all the court cases that were flying around about Mortal Kombat at the time as well. They were like, oh, this game turns our kids into, violent people. It's like, it didn't do that at all. But yeah, I liked it. I wish I could have experienced it when it first came out. In fact, the last time I played the game, Steve, was with Jay at Megabytes. And I was playing Liu Kang, and he was, this was Mortal Kombat 1, and he was teaching me Liu, because he's Mega Drive champion, right, Steve?
Yeah, Jay is, yeah.
Yeah, and he was teaching me how to play Liu Kang. I actually beat him in one round, and I was like, But yeah, the Mortal Kombat movie, I love back then, but going back on it now, I can see why it's got like a 50-50 on the critic sites and stuff.
All right, cool. Steve, speaking of which, what was your first interactions with Mortal Kombat?
Tell me if you've heard this one before. I go around to my elder brother's house, and he's just got a new console, and he has a new shiny game with it. And in this particular case, it was Mortal Kombat. That was my first introduction with it. Was I guess must have been around its launch, because God knows how old I would have been then, 92, 93. The reason this sticks out in my mind is he had that game a day, and then my niece must have snuck out. We had to go find her. I know, this is terrible parenting, but, that's my brother, not me. Went out and find it. We come back, the house has been broken into, and the game's been stolen. And the console. So it was fantastic. That memory, Mortal Kombat and theft.
It all sounds terribly northern.
But,
Do we add that addendum to everything?
but to be fair, okay, it was good enough that it left an impression on us, and we were all gutted, like, oh, really enjoying that. The kids, as opposed to my older brother, was losing his mind, having just had a console and a TV and all the rest of it stolen. Yeah. As for the movie, that was I want to say a video thing, because I was too young to go see it at the cinema at the time. I'm pretty sure in '95.
Yeah. I
would have been like a wee babby at 9. So I want to say it was direct to video. But again, it's hazy,
Right, sure.
I've slept since then. I just simply don't remember seeing it in the cinema. Let's put it that way.
We're old.
Adam, what was your first experiences with Mortal Kombat?
Definitely playground talk, I think.
Yeah, I bet.
For the game, and then like leaning into it. I have a very distinct memory of being at my uncle's house and with my cousins and having it on the Mega Drive and like finding the code. I think still on Mega Drive it had a code, right? It was to turn on all the blood and such.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't naturally unlocked back then.
Mhm.
I remember getting that code and us being like, whoa, like going crazy over it because it turned it into a pretty average, from an average fighter to like a pretty like iconic thing. Then the movie, I would have been 13 when that came out. And I don't really remember being hyped about it too much. I always enjoyed Mortal Kombat. But I was never like super into it. I was a Street Fighter kid for sure.
Ah, okay.
So I wasn't like super into it, but I remember when I did watch it, it would have been on, videotape, VHS. I remember it being like excellent, because it was pretty bad. It's one of those movies that's just like, it's just bad enough to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You didn't get it on Laserdisc, Adam?
No, not Laserdisc.
I think stuff like Playground Talk is definitely, because it's like they went from making a couple games to boom, they're making a movie out of it, which just didn't happen.
Yeah.
This was quite early times for video games being adapted as major motion pictures. So it speaks volumes about what you've all said about sort of its importance. And James, what you were saying about it, maybe your parents being like, you can't play this because everyone's talking about how violent it is and stuff like that.
So violent.
I'm a little bit younger than most of you guys, so I didn't grow up with it.
All right.
But yeah, I'm just going to slide that in there. Counting my wrinkles. So what I remember is it just sort of being part of the gaming landscape very early on. Sort of already by the mid to late 90s, when I was getting like fully interested in video games and would buy magazines and stuff. And this isn't me being sort of nostalgia baity sort of back in my day, but it goes to show the importance of video game magazines at the time and how good they were at telling you what's going on and what is already a bona fide classic. So I knew about Mortal Kombat years and years before I touched any of the games. I could recognize a Mortal Kombat character even if I didn't know their names. I was like, oh, that's one of the Mortal Kombat characters. I know that. I definitely would have dipped in a little bit with like friends' copies and stuff, visiting their houses over the time. But sort of, I am not a fighting game person in general. Most people know that about me. It's not a genre that I've ever totally fallen into. But Mortal Kombat, along with Street Fighter, coincidentally, those are the two franchises that always stuck out the most to me. Just because I love the character designs and stuff. And Mortal Kombat obviously has that in spades. I think that is a huge part of it. It's these iconic characters, this very unique tone and stuff like that. So it always stood out to me as one of the most interesting. And I've sort of dipped in a little bit with the series, but I've never, besides Deadly Alliance, which I picked up really cheap, which I don't think is everyone's favourite game in this series from what I understand. I haven't really played a ton of them, but it's always been a series that I've sort of respected and been interested in just because I just love the style of it. It's just so cool. In terms of the movie, yeah, it would have been a VHS thing as well. Again, around a friend's house or something. And yeah, having not played the games, I probably still enjoyed it because, hey, look at these cool, crazy characters doing cool, crazy fight scenes. And I, for a long time, sort of lauded it, even as, even if it's just an okay film, it's still one of the better video game movies. I guess we'll get to the wrap up on whether or not that is true. But it's been interesting watching it again all these years later. So I guess the first place to start is the story for Mortal Kombat 95, which is it's fairly accurate to the games, I suppose. There is a tournament held all throughout various parallel worlds every so often, where champions from each realm are brought into the tournament and fight to basically defend their universe. And 9 tournaments have been won by the Outworld, 1 more, and Earthrealm has to surrender its defenses. And you've got characters from the video games like Johnny Cage going there to sort of show that he's not a phony movie actor. Sonya Blade goes in there chasing after Kano, a criminal that she's after, and Liu Kang, sort of being the main protagonist for the film, goes in to avenge the death of his younger brother. So that's pretty much the setup. And then from there, I guess the plot is just, hey, look at these fight scenes until the end. That's pretty much what what it feels like. I thought the setup for the film was quite nice. It's out of the way quite quickly. There isn't any unnecessary scenes in terms of the early part of the film or anything like that. Or in general, really, I would say there isn't anything that needs to be overly cut. It's frenetic. Steve, what do you think of the story of Mortal Kombat?
Every character that's significant has an arc. There are some that appear to basically go, "I'm going to be a fight," and that's it. But on the whole, it's okay. It's not going to win any friggin' like awards or anything. But I generally like the characters. Sonya's great. Johnny's. I can't not like see Lyndon Ashby being Johnny Cage, and just that is my mental image of how Johnny Cage should always be.
Yeah, that's fair.
Robin Shaw as Liu is honestly, again, I can't unsee that version of Liu Kang anymore anywhere.
I love his hair so much.
Yeah, man. I love his hair. That's completely aside. It's the same with Shang Tsung. Generally, I think the casting for these and stuff is fantastic. Is what I'm getting at. It's okay. There's like the one bit part character who gets like 2 scenes, and apparently an emotional bond has been built. That's a bit.
Yeah.
Kano is just kind of there to be all like, look, I'm creepy and I'm a bit of a dunce. Apparently, don't clip that, podcast listeners.
I think it's funny that. I was going to kind of go, let's talk about story and then talk about characters, but you dove right into characters. But I think that is actually incredibly apt, because that is the driving part of the film, is the importance, the characters. And yeah, as you say, they do kind of have arcs. They all have a reason to be there. Kelsey, what do you think of the story of the original Mortal Kombat film?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, all the plot is out of the way in the first, not even 20 minutes. I think by the time they get to the island, the plot is done, and then it pretty much, even the dialogue, there's not a lot of dialogue after that point. It just moves from fight scene to fight scene. So the plot is there is a plot. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. They talk about the tournament. I think it's never fully clear kind of what's involved with all that. And from what I understand, Mortal Kombat, the sort of deep lore, if you like, I'm not a Mortal Kombat lore junkie, but I know that these days there is a lot of story there. But I actually don't think it came into place until a couple of maybe even after this film was released is when it really started to develop. So the film doesn't have too much to work with, but as you said, it's fully driven by the characters. And surprisingly, despite some horrific dialogue and things like that, they do all have a reason to kind of be there and do what, it's very clear, Sonya's trying to take down Kano, Johnny wants to prove that he is a real fighter, etc., etc. So it's fine, it's very simple, and you could do a lot more with the lore, but like I said, I don't think it came along till later. Once you've got all that, you could do things like flashbacks and prequels and stories and stuff. But it's very, I don't want to say dumbed down, but the plot is very thin for this film. It's fine.
I'm going to say, at the time of this film's development, they literally had the flavor text in the manual and the little intro screens and the outro screens. That was not a lot to work with.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. It's
actually weird. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's weird to think that they did make the film, because like you said, the game came out and the film was out 2 years later, maybe 2.5 years later.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
It is odd. And what you're saying about dialogue as well, there's not a whole lot of it. and it doesn't really amount to much consequence anyway. It is literally just taking that bare bones and going, okay, well, cool. What do people like about Mortal Kombat? Characters and fights. So it doesn't unnecessarily overcomplicate things, I guess is where I'm going with that. James, what do you think of the story setup, if there even is one?
Yeah. There isn't really one. It's just a very cookie cut, what I would call a cookie cutter story of save the world, don't let the outside world invade, and then it's very easy, as you guys have said, very easy to get into it. You dive in. The dialogue isn't the strong point. The story isn't really the strong point, but really we play Mortal Kombat for the fighting and the fatalities, right? And the movie gives that. Like, I just just to give you an idea, if there's any people, I don't know why you haven't watched this movie yet, go watch it and go watch it with friends, because I think it would be more entertaining that way.
Yeah, probably true.
I have some examples here of stuff that just made me laugh so loud in terms of dialogue. There's a lot about this film, but there's a bit where they're going, it's near the beginning, where they just get to the Outworld tournament. Sorry, it's not the Outworld, is it? It's on the Earth realm. But yeah, the place in the clouds. And Johnny Cage says, Katana went this way, right? And there's undisturbed webs in this tunnel. Yeah. And they're it's like they're just, and the two, like Liu Kang are just and Sonya are just looking at him like, are you sure? And he just goes through these webs like, if Katana went this way, buddy, these webs wouldn't be here, would they?
I could smell that perfume.
And I think the other one, there's a lot of things that made me giggle. And don't get me wrong, I did have fun watching this film. But the other one was when Liu Kang kind of brings back the Katana saying, use the element that brings life. And then he just throws a bucket.
Yeah, buckets.
I mean, for some reason, it had a little bit of water in it, even though. But yeah, oh man, it's a fun film, and like in terms of characters, like I want to talk quickly about. Steve's right. Like all the casting in this show was great, other than a couple. Like Christopher Lambert as Raiden.
Yeah,
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Wait, have you guys watched Annihilation?
No,
I've never seen it.
Okay,
wow.
Don't you dare mock Christopher Lambert, because you do not know what you're in for. Okay.
It's a controversial take. It's a controversial take from James. I've got to just turn around and say, of the two Raidens on display today, you're bad-mouthing the one that I like.
I agree.
What? He's literally just Mortal Kombat Gandalf.
He does in this film.
Yeah, he's got the character.
He does all in the new one.
Mortal Kombat Gandalf.
That's what he is. He's like, and all the Earth Realm fighters are the hobbits,
Like, the amount of charisma you can get from Christopher Lambert just punching some random guy and going sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I love that bit.
It was the constant random giggling from him.
Yeah.
It was like, why are you laughing, Raiden? Like, I don't understand.
I wish we could just pause it right now and watch Annihilation, just so you could have a better.
I will watch Annihilation in the next couple of days.
Good.
Yeah. But the other, I feel like unsung heroes, because they're so popular within the series. But at the same time, I realized they're trying to get down to a time frame with the movie. But it was the absolute wiping the floor with Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Reptile. Like these, well, not so much Reptile, but Sub-Zero and Scorpion got absolutely wrecked, right? Yeah. And they're like, when you think of Mortal Kombat, you think of Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and they got ruined. I think they just got caught up in the fact that they're basically palette swap enemies. So, yeah, and I'm not going to be too harsh on the, when I looked at it, I thought, wow, this was a long time ago when I seen the CGI of Reptile.
Oh my god,
stuff.
We'll get to that. Yeah,
we'll definitely talk about that.
I mean, we'll go more on later, but also, I think my favorite character in this entire movie was Prince Goro. That's all I want to say.
Okay, interesting. Adam, what do you think of the plot and the characters? I guess we'll move on to that now.
I mean, we can't talk about this movie without. I mean, it opens with the biggest banger of all time.
Yeah.
It's just like, has any movie hyped you up more from like the opening logo with that theme tune? It's just amazing.
Mhm.
And then we get into it, and it's pretty generic. It's a very generic action film. They were obviously aiming at not really like. It's funny because Mortal Kombat is infamous for being a. Do you remember this term, Steve? Video nasty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yes,
I remember
Jeez.
that.
The game is infamous for being a video nasty, as they used to call it. If it was a video game or a movie that was like Child's Play, remember all the furor around Child's Play? It was reviled by like a certain portion of the adult kind of population of the UK at least, and I'm assuming America as well.
Mhm.
And you know, it was the end. Classic, like, if your kids play this game, they're going to kill someone or whatever. And then, you know, it's so funny that the movie comes out and it's so timid.
Right.
Like, you can tell it kind of wants to go there.
I don't think there's a drop of blood
never
in the film.
does.
If there is, it's just like on a
Scorpion
character's
has weird
skin, no one
lava blood,
bleeds.
and that's pretty much
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah, but that's not even really blood, so...
No.
I mean,
Yeah,
the most
it's-
violent death is what? The Indiana Jones style moment with Sub-Zero and some random dude.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Yeah, Goro kills something. Is like finish him, and then Goro just punches him in like
Oh
not
my
even the
God.
head. He like punches him on the
Barely.
shoulder blade,
Yeah, he barely punches
and
it.
then he's dead.
It's-
Which is kind of interesting because it might be a nod to like I don't want to give Paul W.S. Anderson too much credit, but in the game, the only model that didn't like in the original game, the only guy that didn't have a fatality was Goro because he wasn't playable. He would just
Yeah,
walk up
sure,
and like
of course.
punch you.
That is funny, yeah. How weird.
Yeah, but it would have been nice to see like. For some reason, I had it in my head that he was gonna do the Jax like arm pull on that guy. Like, I don't know if I had remembered it incorrectly, or I was just like, oh, that's a thing that can happen.
Is
The
it
characters
I
are
can
fun
picture-
though. I mean, this. I don't have much to say about the plot. I mean, it has. This is one of the very first video game adaptations, I believe, and
Yeah,
I
one
don't
of the
blame
first
them
major
because
ones.
if you play, I mean, even up to Mortal Kombat 3, there wasn't much of a plot. There's kind of like an opening to get into it, and then you just fight a bunch of dudes, and that's kind of what the movie does. So can't complain there. I think they give them. Everyone has a character arc. All the enemies, they did a faithful kind of, for the most part, to the costuming of the game,
Yeah.
which is nice to see because a lot of movies, even later than that, shy away. Like if we look at like say the X-Men movie, where they're all just in like black leather suits or whatever, and in Street Fighter where no one is like there's cameos of their costumes, but generally they're just like people. It was nice to have a movie where they're all just like, this is who it is, and they punch people.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that.
I have to completely reinforce like so much of what James said. The big like I think we all agree like those main protagonists, those arcs are really good and sort of the most clear sort of logical thing about the film. But the way Sub-Zero and Scorpion are both just kind of completely demoted to these like henchmen slave types is really bad looking back, because when you think of Mortal Kombat now, they're potentially the first characters most people think of, and in this film they are just they're just completely swept aside.
I think that their legend has built, like the legend of those characters has built up more in prior games though. Like they definitely were a very distinct focal part of the game. Scorpion was like super cool, and Sub-Zero was literally cool, and but you know, by Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, you know, they weren't the
It's relevant.
Right.
yeah, exactly. They were still
Mortal Kombat
very
3.
well known characters, but you know, even It was Midway,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, they didn't even really push them that much, you know. They were trying to push Liu Kang, definitely.
Yeah.
He was like one of the main characters. He was like the good guy. So I can see why, you know, they were kind of relegated to their villain
that makes
spots.
sense.
Yeah,
Sense.
they the only story we got about those two characters was when they were first introduced and they were about to kick some Earth fighter butt, and then Shang says they're deathly enemies. That's all we know. Like that's all we got to know. And I was like, okay, they're bad guys.
You can tell because they got no eyes.
Yeah.
And then when Sub-Zero steps up and does that, he freezes that guy and his head comes off. It's like, wow, how is anybody going to be able to beat this guy? And then, like you said, Liu Kang kind of beats him in not even 2 minutes with like the simplest sort of fight ever. And yeah, it was sort of sad to see them both sidelined. But that actually, what Adam said, makes perfect sense as to why that probably happened. And then, yeah, just quickly, Goro is really, really good in this film. His fight is really bad, but his scene that he has with Kano, like the intro, is so good. The way they sort of they're kind of trying to one up each other on, you know, who's the biggest badass. And I, as kind of silly as some of it does look, I will always think that the practical Goro effect just looks better. I just prefer it, you know, sort of to CG.
I mean, comparing it to the CG in this movie, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure we'll get to that. And then, but Christopher Lambert, like James, sort of, you know, you're kind of laughing at him, but yeah, and I think it comes off way more in. I really, really like him as Raiden in this film. And first, there's like two specific moments I just have to mention. There's one where he just closes the stone door and just stares at Liu Kang and Johnny Cage, and he just holds it for like longer than anyone is supposed to hold a stare, and the door closes past him, which made me burst out laughing.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, and then there's like a bit towards the end where he's like celebrating, and he sort of claps and slaps the guy in front of him and just goes, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah, it's so weird.
But I had a look online, and so apparently the script, like, I don't know if you could tell, but they shot a lot of this film without a finished script. And so they just said to Christopher Lambert, just, you know, kind of do what you want and improvise. And all that stuff is completely him. And he is like, he wasn't kind of trying to take the piss. He apparently is a really big fan of Mortal Kombat. And he like flew out to, he went to shoots that he didn't need to be at so he could be off camera and people could respond to him and things like that, and he did that unpaid, and he also paid for like rap parties and things like that, and that just makes me love him even more. So yeah, I just wanted to get that in about the characters, because those main ones are fine, but then I just had those sort of strong thoughts about Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Goro and Raiden.
Man, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to just say that, you know, it's weird to think that the elder god, who's basically on, you know, team good guy, who can't actually fight, is also the comic relief character.
Yeah.
And I there's something about that that's just so endearing to me. I just want to touch on, you know, with Scorpion and Sub-Zero now being obviously front of marketing for most things Mortal Kombat.
Right.
It's this was just around the release of Mortal Kombat 3. This was coming out, and Scorpion had actually been axed from that roster to the point where there was a controversy, and he had to be added back in for the quote unquote ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and then MK trilogy. So there was a point when they actually thought, we don't need, you know, yellow Hook, get over here guy, which is surprising considering they are like, if like I said, if it's not Sub-Zero, it's Scorpion is supposed to be, right? I do want to touch on the fact that no one seems to have acknowledged that Reptile isn't even a ninja for most of this film. Are they even a character really, or just a statue abomination?
So it's funny. So on the point about Scorpion, I actually sort of looked back through the Mortal Kombat games, and he is on the front cover for pretty much all of them after a certain point. So obviously, as you say, he became the poster character. But yeah, around this point, as you so clearly pointed out there, definitely not the case. I imagine these characters didn't have a whole lot of backstory, as we were saying. There wasn't a lot of lore. Whereas over time, they have definitely been, made the most important characters, the most recognizable characters, and the characters with the most amount of attention given to them, perhaps. In terms of Reptile, I actually looked this one up. That fight scene with him wasn't even in the movie at one point. That was added in afterwards because focus groups were unsatisfied with the amount of and the quality of the fight scenes, which I want to get into a bit as well. That is one of the better fight scenes in the films as well, which is lucky. It does bring it back after some pretty naff stuff for me. But yeah, it's a shame you don't get to see him in the green ninja suit, but that's probably why. Cheaper just to have a CGI. That sounds absolutely nonsense, but I guess to add, if they knew they were going to do a CGI monster, they might as well just do a CGI monster instead of casting someone else. Getting a new
it's a novel concept. CGI
Sure.
lizard gets eaten by a statue, becomes sentient ninja man, and then gets the crap kicked out of him. All the while, one of the most bangingest tunes to ever bang the tunes playing. Yeah, so I'll stop.
It's a shame about some of the other fights in some of the other characters, because Sub-Zero, as everyone has pointed out, just gets royally jobbed off by his own stupid mistakes almost. Goro basically dies because he gets kicked in the nuts and then falls off a cliff, which is a shame, because as Kelsey said, and we'll get there, the practical effect absolutely outweighs stuff like the way the Reptile looks. Despite the fight scene being pretty good, the CGI is of course pretty shoddy, which is the same with Raiden's powers. To put my hat into the Raiden argument, he is the star power of the film in the sense that he's the established actor coming in. So he knows the most about what he's doing, and it shows because he knows how to play B-movie characters. Because stuff like the stupid laughs to himself are just a real treat to behold. Like he's really helping the tone of that film by throwing stuff in there like that.
He's a chill lightning god.
He's a chill, yeah.
Yeah, he's
He
got
is a little
character.
Right. It's a shame in a weird way. This is just a thing, obviously we're 20-something years on from this film. It is funny seeing them, Lou go to this, like, monastery with all these monks and stuff, and their god is just, like, a white dude. Like, I just thought that was quite funny in retrospect. Couldn't do that now. Yep. Some of Johnny's lines as well, you wouldn't have anymore. So some of that's kind of like, but he brings an important brevity to the film, I think. And his interactions with Sonya can be quite funny, and his interactions with Lou are quite funny as well. So the sort of character unit felt pretty good. And as Steve said, I think when I think Johnny Cage, I do think, what's his name? Lyndon Ashby?
Lyndon Ashby.
Lyndon Ashby. As it turns out, also he was in Resident Evil Extinction. Didn't realise that. He was the sniper in Resident Evil Extinction.
And say Lyndon Ashby, Bridget Wilson, and I don't want to butcher his name. The chap who played Shang Tsung all have now reprised their roles.
Yes, in the films. That's right. Yeah, it mainly
in the game.
Yeah, sorry, in the game.
MK11.
That's right. There's film DLC for the game, isn't there? Which again shows the sort of legacy of the film for sure, and the legacy of those character portrayals. I think it's Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa is his name.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the gem of the whole thing. 100%. Without him, for me, the film just falls to pieces. Without him, it would be an absolute flop. He's wonderful.
It's funny because
some sunglasses, perfect Wesker.
yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So, like Danny before Christopher Lambert, they were talking about Danny Glover.
Wow. For
Raiden. I don't know if that would have made it better or worse.
That's weird. That's really, really weird.
Yeah. I would say the thing that I really dislike about this movie, like actually dislike, probably is I don't know if this class is character related really, but like the romance, the 2 points of romance that come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like two people that basically don't talk to each other outside of single lines suddenly have like this romantic involvement, and it's just like, ugh.
That was
I'm so glad that we're past that in movies now. Like an action movie doesn't have to have like a romance line going through it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like that's a very 90s thing.
It is a very 90s thing.
Yeah. It's funny. It goes to show that we haven't really spoken about Katana at all. She sort of like set dressing, to be honest. I didn't really.
What happened?
The worst fight in the whole movie as well. God, that fight is so boring.
Right. Yeah.
All the directing and vocal talent of a filing cabinet, I believe, was the term. And that's brutal for one of the key characters in, like, in the wider mythos of Mortal Kombat. Kitana's a big friggin' deal. So the fact that they, probably had the same energy as, D-Generation's Leon Kennedy is kind of bad.
I think, and I don't want, this isn't me disparaging her performance, not that I was particularly interested in it, but from what I understand, they hired her based just essentially on her look. I think she was a model rather than an actor at the time, so that probably is a contributing factor. But in terms of other random fun trivia of characters, before we move on, I know, Mr. KDB, you have an interesting one about Sub-Zero for any wrestling fans out there.
Yeah. There's so anybody who watched WWF sort of in mid to late 90s should know the name Francois Petit. Now, whenever somebody got really injured, like put through a table or, had hit over the head with a chair and they couldn't leave on their own feet, they had to be stretchered out. And so this chap would always come out and he'd always get name dropped. Our medical expert, Francois Petit. And that name has always been with me. And then when I watched the film this week, I sort of looked back and read up about it a bit. And it turns out that Francois Petit, the medical doctor from 90s WWF, is also a fully trained martial artist. And he plays Sub-Zero in this film, which to me was sort of a moment where you kind of read that and go, how is that actually possible? But
how's that real life?
Checked, and it is completely true. He is fully trained martial artist, also a real doctor. And yeah, he got sidelined in this film a little bit, but I think they used him. They brought him on to direct whoever they were going to cast, but then he turned out to just be so good that they used him instead.
I mean, why not? I guess you're putting two
quote
characters
unquote
in masks,
so good.
Right?
Yeah,
so good, yeah.
It's good at the martial arts stuff.
It's funny if you pull up the classic freeze frame of him like punching forward next to like actually hench dudes, it's hilarious how like wimpy he looks.
So let's talk about visuals and stuff, the direction and the CGI and all of that. It has been name dropped. I was going to say this at the beginning of the show, it just didn't come up. But yeah, this is a Paul W.S. Anderson joint. Apparently, we just love him so much that we can't get away from his productions. After talking about 6 Resident Evil films that he was in some way attached to, now we get to talk about another one. I'll get the ball rolling in terms of his directing in this and the DOP stuff. This is better than most of the stuff in the Resident Evil films. I'm not going to say it's great, but there's actually some interesting bits in here. James, what do you think about the direction and the visual look of this film?
Yeah, speaking of visual, like want to go back on something KDB said at the beginning. Yeah, I think, when you mentioned Street Fighter KDB, I think like there's a point in Street Fighter where they are at like that Shaolin temple they go to, or the Warriors of Light, I think it's called, or something, like that temple. Like there's like a very similar fighting scene, and I love that bit. When you first meet Raiden and Liu Kang's being a little bit of a child and stuff. And so I love that set, and I love the sets that they use. They are really cool. There's a lot of work that's gone into them. Now it is Paul W.S. Anderson, so I mean it's not top tier, but it is. Yeah, I agree with you, say like this is better than, like, in terms of the way it's shot and stuff, is better than Resident Evil, and how it looks. I said earlier on, but the CGI is not fantastic. It doesn't really, it didn't really pull me in at all. But I think, that this was during the, the beginning of CGI when things were being experimented with. And it's like, it was more about, oh, we've got a CGI monster in this movie rather than it looking good. Like it was like a gimmick, I feel. And everybody, back then, everybody would have been down for that. It was like when, Independence Day came out a couple years later, that movie had great CGI for the time. And we were all suckered into it. I love that movie. But yeah, probably like my favorite visual about this movie, because it's kind of synonymous with the game, I guess, is Prince Goro. He looks so good. He, like, the practical effects of him, like I was looking at it, I was going, man, this must have cost a lot. Like, because I was looking at it and
That's why the
yeah,
CG looks like it does.
put all the money into Prince Goro. Yeah, he looks so good. It is sad that we didn't get to see him like smash some fools, but I feel that wasn't other than like kind of chopping Art Lean in the shoulder. And
hey, we got that jump cut of all of Earthrealm heroes getting their asses kicked, and they all dress the same apparently.
But yeah, like Prince for that reason, Prince Goro's my favorite. So my cat is meowing in the background. Yeah, he just looks so great. They've really worked on the face, how he looked, and how he reacted, how his arms all moved. And yeah, I agree with you, KDB, as well. Like my favorite scene with him was when Kano's eating that. I don't know, that wasn't a turkey, that was something else. This giant turkey leg on the table, and like they were having their little chat. That was my favorite scene in the whole movie because it was just two bad guys being bad. Like it was kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, even in terms of forgetting about Reptile for a second, even the kind of the effects of Sub-Zero, maybe not Scorpion. I feel like that would have been better if it was a darker palette, like because the light of the scene just made his Scorpion thing like look really ridiculous. But yeah, all the other like the lightning, the cold effects. The kind of the soul sucking that you would see occasionally,
right.
And stuff was super cool. I really liked it, and it, I felt, if I watched this when it came out, I would have been completely like sold by it. Probably wouldn't have been by Reptile, but by everything else, yeah, looked great. Really loved the look of it.
Adam, what do you think of the visual direction for the film?
It looks awful. No, I'm joking. Like I already hinted on before, I'm really happy that the characters all got their approximations at least of their what they look like in the game, more so than anything else. The effects are horrible. Prince Goro looks dumb. Like I know that you love him, James. I don't have the same feeling. I think he has a very weird Disney genie kind of face. Like paint him blue, and he could have been like in the
different film. Very different film.
A little,
he's Prince Goro.
Joe, he gave me the feeling of like the Super Mario's like real life like film.
Goomba things.
Yeah, like he gave me that feeling, and goodness. For some reason I love that movie, and it's so bad, but I love it.
You shush, it's great.
But yeah, it's I mean, the CG is truly horrible. Off the top of my head, I can't think of many movies that have done it worse. And I know it was a burgeoning thing back then, but I mean, look at Jurassic Park, and I know obviously the budget there is wildly different.
Yeah.
But it's just like, if you can't do it like that, maybe don't do it. You didn't need to. A lot of it was unnecessary, and it definitely showed how Paul W.S. Anderson was going to advance in his sort of career. It's like Scorpion didn't need a weird whatever it is that comes out of his hand really badly. Like, just give him a freaking kunai on a rope. Like, it'll be fine. It'll be better even.
Yeah, it's funny that you said Jurassic Park, because I thought the same thing. And it obviously came out 2 years beforehand, and you're right, because these are completely different films, but it does kind of feel like after that film happened, everyone wanted their own slice of the pie. Right. And they just kind of assumed just any CGI, that's what people want. And it did work to a certain extent, because as James said, it was like a brand new, exciting revolution at the time. But
exactly. I mean, I remember when I first watched it, I mean, I don't remember, obviously, but I remember not being like, oh, God, look how bad that all looks, because it was a kind of new thing. But obviously it didn't age well. And I would argue to not do it if you can't do it as well as what's already been out there, at least, or, learn to do it in a way, like James said, he had a fight in a field, like in the sun, basically. It's like, do it in like a cave or something, so that we don't.
Right.
So you don't have to see it as much. But other than that, I liked most of the incidental effects. I liked all the lightning effects and stuff, which were also bad, but they were like the fun old school. They reminded me of old school like effects, you know what I mean? Like when they used to like layer it over the film. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was weird because when we first saw Goro, you know, and Kano, I forgot to talk about him in the character section, but Kano's my standout. I don't know, this guy's just had a weird like British, maybe Australian, I'm not sure what he was supposed to be, but there's something.
He is actually English, but he he pretended to do an Australian accent in his audition.
That was his approximate. Okay,
yeah, and they kept it, and it actually informed Kano in the games as well after this film.
That's amazing because like for some reason like he just exudes character amongst some of the other people. Like there's something about his character that's just like fun. Like it's probably easier because he just gets to be like a dumb villain basically. Right. But yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the effects really. They're crappy, but it's a crappy movie, and that's fine.
Steve, what do you think of the visual direction for Mortal Kombat 95?
I think it's okay. CG notwithstanding, I feel like Paul W.S. Anderson must have watched some classic Bruce Lee stuff like Game of Death. That stuff on the beach feels very like a Bruce Lee film.
Yeah.
And the tournament stuff. I that's the general, like the aesthetics of the arenas. They always seem to give me that kind of, this is a fight. Bruce Lee could have a fight in this kind of place. As for Goro, I think it's on par with stuff that Star Wars did in the 80s. Which is actually kind of high praise, I suppose, for the budget in 1995. CGI is, of course, complete dog. I like some of the NAF CGI even now, like Raiden's eyes. There's something about the way that they go. I don't think so. And as cheesy as it is, the weird pulsing shockwave of Sub-Zero's like ice ball, which looks like a Dragon Ball Z move gone wrong. I actually, for some reason, go, yeah, that looks kind of cool, actually. Cool ice, ha ha ha. I am funny. But then you've got like sweeping CGI shots up towers of meaninglessness in Outworld. Yeah, and I just it's all right.
It's like a PS1 cutscene.
Yeah, like Castlevania or something.
Yeah.
When they're on the boat and like the skull appears in the sky and stuff, that really looks like a PS1 cutscene.
I enjoyed the stuff on the boat until then.
Yes,
the creepy chains and stuff. Yeah, and now overall, I feel like it's probably one of their best. Paul W.S. Anderson's best in terms of actual like framing a shot and a location. It's just. The effects are either incredibly practical, but from what I understand, Goro was prone to breaking and not the most animate. Like you'll never see them running, will you? The shot of them moving, their legs are never shown, for example.
Yeah.
But the face stuff I thought was okay, and the fact that he just grabs people and punches them is on par with the game. So yeah, kind of wish that they did a bit more with it, like. Liu Kang's whole bit is flying kicks and fireballs. I think there's like the briefest, like cheesy cartoon flash of a fireball from him near the end, and otherwise not a whole lot. Johnny Cage does no special effects, despite that being sort of his gimmick. Like he'll have a shadow burst from himself and chuck balls and stuff. So yeah, stuff that I would have liked to have seen that would have fit the NAF CG wasn't there. Reptile looks completely awful. Although I do like the morphing between, when it goes from CGI man in statue or CGI thing in statue to a man. I thought that was actually kind of all right for the time.
Yeah. I think we'd almost be remiss not to sort of. I mean, we touched a little bit sort of the lack of gore, and it's so funny now because I just googled the VHS cover for when this was brought out on home video, and it was a 15, and like that is hilarious now looking at it that this film was ever a 15. And people were saying, oh, you kids shouldn't see this film because it's really not that bad. And it absolutely should have been an 18 considering the level of violence in the video games, which is just not here, is it? like they made a Mortal Kombat film, but from my eyes, there isn't really any fatalities in it. Someone says it, great. That doesn't mean you need to see some heads being and spines dangling in the air as someone pulls it out of someone. It just, and obviously we're going to talk about the new film, but watching them back to back, man, did I ever notice that in comparison. Kelsey, what do you think of the sort of visual design for the film?
Yeah, I won't kind of retread everything people have said. I think I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. I do want to just really praise the sets. The sets are really, really good. Those big practical sets, like a lot of it is in the studio, is in a studio, but they clearly went to a lot of effort, and the atmosphere is great. It has, and how much of that is Paul W.S. Anderson, and I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll never know really. But so the sets are good. I really like that, and most of the 90% of the CG is just atrocious. And I don't think budget is an excuse, because there were lots of films with, a budget less than Jurassic Park that still had better CG than this. And then just quickly, I've got to stick up for Goro. I know Adam, not a fan, but I agree with Steve. It's very sort of Star Wars like, and that practical effect is good. And just when I compare it to the modern one, which we'll get onto, there's just no competition. Even with how kind of robotic he looks in this old version, I just prefer it all day, and I think he's great. I connected with him a lot more than I did a CG Goro. So yeah, it looks, most of the film looks great apart from the shoddy CG. But on a whole, it looks great. The very end when is it the Emperor guy? I can't remember his name.
It's Shao Kahn.
Yeah,
probably.
That's like straight out of Power Rangers from like 1993, and it's really bad. But the film literally ends like 3 seconds later, thank God. So, the atmosphere, the sets are good, the way it's shot. There's some of that sort of classic, like harsh 90s noir lighting. Like it's not black and white; it's in color, but the sort of white light piercing through the windows, lots of shadows and things like that, which the atmosphere is great. I can't fault the atmosphere in the way it looks in general. There's
a scene really early on, just to sort of wrap this one up, where it's the first scene where Liu Kang wakes up from a nightmare or whatever it is, and his entire apartment is just like bathed in this green light. My first thought was, where the hell is his apartment that he's just got this weird moody green light coming all through the window? That's a very weird thing, but I'll admit it's kind of cool and different, I suppose. But yeah, I'm Camp Goro, yes, for this film. I appreciate he's one of the standout effects, definitely. I'm in agreement that practicality always wins for me over CGI. But let's hit the last point before we wrap up this first film, which is of course audio. As people have mentioned, the origin of the theme music for Mortal Kombat, not just had a huge impact on the game franchise, but also as the lead single off of the soundtrack CD, it was kind of huge for music, because the soundtrack for Mortal Kombat, the film, is the first dance music album that reached platinum in America. The Mortal Kombat soundtrack, and it is just based on that theme music. You've got to give it up for that, and it's part of video game fabric now. We were just before we were recording the film, we were just talking about how it's been stuck in our heads all week. So that's again lucky for Anderson, I suppose, because that's a big selling point, I think. In terms of the rest of the music, it's a decent selection for the time. Mid-90s dance music. It was the cutting edge. You had sort of like industrial stuff going on there, and a little bit.
You've got Fear Factory and KMFDM, haven't you?
Right, yeah. KMFDM, those are the standout ones for me, and Fear Factory, of course, which was sort of the cutting edge of metal, in particular that one at the time, which is quite interesting that they get this sort of shout out. They're sort of associated with this film because of Zero Signal. People will be like, oh yeah, I remember Fear Factory from Mortal Kombat. It's weird because some of the tracks don't fit with the movie, I feel like. But they do and they don't. It's almost like someone's made a YouTube music video for me. And maybe it's because I know that Fear Factory song really well because I'm a huge fan. But the way that song is like chopped up into parts for the Johnny and Scorpion fight scene is wildly distracting for me. But maybe that's just because I know how the song's actually meant to go. But it just sort of flips around. It's really weirdly edited. But in terms of the selection of the music and of course the theme song, it's a really solid part for me. Steve, what do you think of the soundtrack and the audio design in general?
I'm similar to you, like having heard Zero Signal in Carmageddon, the album Demon Fracture, and this. Hearing it it was very weird. Like it pretty much kicks in as they enter the Scorpion's realm or whatever you want to call it, and it's all over the place. But then, Sonya's fight with, Kano and KMFDM's joint Jezebel starts playing in an instrumental version, which is again a pretty banger track. But it feels more like something out of a Tekken game than a Mortal Kombat thing, if that makes sense. It kind of draws me out as this isn't Fight on the Beach music. Because there's clearly a set music you're meant to fight on a beach, Steve, in your head. So it's still groovy though. Musically speaking, it's whenever they go for like Sonic, let's have fun and put silly music over the top, or techno or metal, it's great. But when it's just trying to be serious, it's just
yeah, that's fair.
Like the woodwinds of Katana. Every time I hear them, I just want to like slowly die inside. It's just, okay, cool, fantastic. Let's move on to the fun bits now, please. Yeah, and obviously Techno Syndrome by Utah Saints, better known probably by many as, Mortal Kombat, is definitely a part of the fabric and the fandom. So much so, in fact, that for some reason or another, it's never been in the games, like up until this latest entry, to massive fan aplomb. So that's a weird thing for me, because that tune's always been associated with Mortal Kombat for obvious reasons. Right. It has only just made the jump into the video games. I
wager that if you hear a friend bring up the subject of Mortal Kombat, 8 times out of 10, someone's going to go, so, yeah. And that's because, it's probably because of the theme music. It's probably not from the commercial where that originally comes from and then was slapped on the theme music. It's because of the theme music. Adam, what do you think of the audio design for the film?
I'm blown away that there's other songs in this movie. This sounds horrible, but I only remember the Mortal Kombat song. And every scene of action, I feel like had the Mortal Kombat song. I just didn't hear anything else.
For an hour and a half, just
pretty much from start to finish, it was just going over and over in my head.
Could we have had a dynamic score where it literally is just different variations of the theme playing? So you've got your moody quiet, Mortal Kombat.
The ballad version, etc.
It's funny because the sad music version. But yeah, I honestly only remember that. I applaud you guys for being knowledgeable on the soundtracks. I just know it has the shouty Mortal Kombat song, and I'm here for it.
To be fair, sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
James, what do you think of the audio direction for the film?
Yeah, it's like this film did the 100 remixes of Lil Nas X, before Lil Nas X. I personally feel like
it's a very timely reference. I love it.
No, but he's if no one's not in the know, every single song that Lil Nas X does is remixed into 100 different things, and I love each one of them. I love every single track in this film, except, and I love this song, but it had no place in this film. And that's Halcyon On and On by Orbital.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
Right at the end. I adore that song, and I played it to death. Back in the day.
Yeah.
And then it came on and I was like, wait, what? Why is this here?
This is the ending theme to Hackers. What's it doing here?
I was so confused why that was on. In terms the music was great. Other than that bit, I loved every single scene. Probably the strongest point actually, and also the the design, like they did a lot of dubbing, and like that was pretty on point. Like there was no like lag between any of the audio that I was expecting. Like typically with kind of 80s martial arts and 70s martial arts, you'll see a lot of that, and there was none of that in this one.
Oh, the Foley.
They're on point. Say again?
You mean the Foley, the hit sounds, and like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just like typically you would see some lag there, or it just wouldn't be realistic. Yeah, every single hit was believable. I even in terms of the sound. But why was Halcyon on and on? I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
That's a fair point, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if it's done right, you don't notice. So good to call that out as well. KDB, what was your thought on the audio design for the film?
Yeah, I just what James said just there, like the sound design as opposed to the kind of soundtrack is actually really good. Just to sort of throw something different in there, the scene with Liu Kang, I don't know if the person who fights has a name, but
I don't
with
think
the sticks,
so. Yeah.
When they have the fight with the sticks, that's really, really good, and the sound's great on that. Like sound design, some of it is very whoosh, whoosh, sort of very classic sound, sort of stock sound effect, but it works. It all sits in and is bedded in really fine. And then what else to say about the soundtrack? I'm kind of with you that the genres of music used are probably my kind of two favorite genres of music. So I love the soundtrack. I've listened to the soundtrack a lot this week, but also prior, just randomly songs on playlists. So I think when you think of 90s, like so many movies in the 90s have these iconic soundtracks, with songs on tracks that you can listen to as opposed to score. And this is definitely one of them that is way, way up there, despite, issues that the film may have. The soundtrack is really, really flipping good, and the musical talent that sort of was involved in making the music and the tracks that they use is way too good for this movie, if you like. So
yeah, I mean that's fair. And as I said, sort of, this was very much the current goings on. It was very much on the pulse almost of what was going on. So that was a huge selling point for especially younger audiences that would have picked that album up. Right, so I know everyone's excited to talk about the new film, and I'm sure everyone's excited to hear us talk about it. So let's wrap up the 95 Mortal Kombat with some final thoughts. Adam, what's your overall opinion of the classic Mortal Kombat film?
It's a great movie. It's dumb. It doesn't bring a lot to the table in terms of story, but it's definitely a fun watch with friends movie. It's firmly in that zone, and if you haven't watched it, you should absolutely watch it.
Interesting. Kelsey, what's your final thoughts on it?
I think it's a really bad film. Like, I don't get me wrong, I enjoy watching it, and I enjoyed when I watched it again this week. I was like, this is not as good as I remember. But I still found lots to love in there. It's it's like probably a solid 2 out of 5. One point being for the soundtrack, 1 point being for Christopher Lambert, and I think that's it. It is really fun to watch, and watching it with friends, I think you'll get a lot out of it. But as far as as you said, this was so successful. This film, it made so much money at the time, but I don't know how. And I think it only made money based off the Mortal Kombat name, because even at the time, there was films with much better choreography and CG and acting and dialogue. We didn't really talk about the fighting itself, sort of the fight choreography, but it's pretty bad in this film. The reptile scene, as you said, is probably the best one. There are times when I think at one point Bridget Wilson actually puts her arm out and somebody just runs into it as if she's sort of clotheslining them, but she doesn't even move. She just stood there. And it's in slow motion, which makes it look even worse. And there's a lot of that in there. A lot of the fighting looks very much like it's the rehearsals have made it onto film. But yeah, it's fun. It is fun, but generally it's pretty bad.
Mr. Moist Owlet, what's your final thoughts on the 1995 Mortal Kombat?
Yeah, I'll just echo. It's not good. It's not a good movie. Please go watch it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I do have a small note here about like, and this I do love the new one, and we'll go into that in a second. But there's some fight scenes in this older one that were better than the newer movie.
Interesting.
In my opinion, like just the way the connects were done and stuff. But overall, yeah, summary, I was entertained. It made me laugh. You know, and Mortal Kombat's not meant to be really that serious. It's about people, you know, killing each other because the Earth is about to be taken over by another world. You know, it's not meant to be taken seriously. And yeah, if you go into it like expecting kind of seriousness, then you probably won't enjoy the movie as much as just, you know, relaxing, turning your brain off, and just enjoying what's on the screen.
That's fair. Steve, final thoughts?
So this is weird. I feel like in terms of the Mortal Kombat fandom, this laid a groundwork for a lot of the franchise to then follow in terms of how characters can be, the tone of them, and they obviously have a reasonable, like, you know, aftershock in that people still want to hear that theme tune. They're still like they ate up the concept of having these characters appear in the game finally, but it's crap. It's a film that if there's nothing on, it's a Sunday afternoon, I've got nothing on, I'm flicking through the TV, and it's there, I'll watch it.
Yeah. But
would I go and seek it out? Probably not. Would I want to listen to the tunes? Yeah, I'll bang the album on. But it's again though, you know, some of the performances I actually kind of really like though. Like for example, Christopher Lambert, Lyndon Ashby, and Shang Tsung's actor. And you know, fair play. You know, Bridget Wilson's Sonya, who I don't think we've given much credence to.
Yeah,
doesn't do a whole lot. She doesn't have a whole lot of lines, but kind of cool as a take on, you know, action lady in the 90s, which was a rarely touched on thing. There is a kind of unfortunate misogynistic turn towards the end on that front, but overall, yeah. So you could do worse if you haven't seen Mortal Kombat but are listening to this podcast for whatever reason. I mean, good on you. Yeah. Easily the best film Paul W.S. Anderson's done regarding a game.
Probably true. That's I can agree with that. But for me, this lands very much in the middling area of sort of, it's decent. You know, it's not as good as I remembered it being. After years of saying that it was one of the better video game movies, which still technically might be kind of true because we're still kind of only just starting to rise up in what that can actually mean. But there's little more to this than B-movie fluff. And
I think the fact that it wears that on its sleeve is adds actually a credence to it, because the follow-up is
I'm never
so good for Annihilation. Don't
I'm never
take your time.
Watch it. I'm never going to watch it. I think when this came out, it was like a weird curio for mainstream audiences. Like, oh, you know, it's a movie based on this video game that everyone's talking about and how violent the video game is and blah, blah, blah. But at this point, unless you're a Mortal Kombat film fan and for some reason haven't seen the film, or unless you're just like a gaming historian type of person, there isn't much need to watch this. Unless, as some of you guys have said, I will agree, if you're with friends and you want something to, you know, crack jokes at or whatever, then it'll be a good time. You know, it's all right. It isn't going to have a lasting effect on most people. I doubt it's that many people's favourite film ever, but it's all right. You could do a lot worse.
The thought that comes to mind, KDB mentioned earlier, I think, about how Shao Kahn appears like a Power Rangers villain, and Power Rangers with a slightly mature rating is what this feels like at times.
However, there is just nothing mature about this film. There's no violence in it at all. And I think, like, say this new generation of video game players or fans pick up Mortal Kombat 11. Is that the most recent one?
Yeah.
11. And they play that, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to go back and watch this movie from the 90s. They're just going to laugh their heads off and be like, what is this crap? Because, like I said, I don't think there's a drop of blood in the film. There's not much violence. There is lots to love about it, as I said. But as a Mortal Kombat film, I don't know. I'm not sure it lives up to the Mortal Kombat name. if I'm honest.
In retrospect, perhaps, and what the
Yes,
franchise
that's
has
fair.
been, I would totally agree with that.
That's fair.
Flawless victory.
All right, so let's talk about Mortal Kombat 2021. It's hard to keep track of the production of this film, honestly, because the history of Mortal Kombat as a film franchise is kind of a mess at this point. The first sequel we've touched on several times was received so poorly that a planned third and final movie got delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. In 2010, I hope I pronounced this right, Kevin Tancharoen directed an 8-minute short called Mortal Kombat Rebirth. I remember when that came out, in fact, and that got a lot of attention, and he was subsequently picked as the director for the new actual movie, which was set to enter production. It was even assigned a budget before it was delayed for many more years. We roll around to 2015. James Wan signed on as producer, and then in the following years, you've got your director in his debut, Simon McQuaid, I think, and Greg Russo was one of the writers. The film released as of yesterday, 24th of April 2021, either via HBO Max in the US and in some regions of the world in cinema. It currently holds a 53% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 43 out of 100 on Metacritic. Since we can't do a what was your first exposure to this film since it came out yesterday, what I will quickly point out is, obviously, as I neglected to mention there, is the film's availability in the UK, which was, and still is, a big question mark. For a while, it looked like it was coming to Amazon Prime, and then on the day of release, suspiciously, that information seemed to be vanishing from articles all over the internet, and nobody knew quite what was going on. At the time of speaking, there has been no statement from the production studios in any capacity. Assumption being, I suppose, not to put too fine of a point on real life, but we are about 3 weeks out at the time of recording from cinemas reopening in the UK, so most likely they're holding off for that. Don't need to go in too depth in this, but it is 2021. If you're going to try and do a staggered release like this, then prepare yourself for the consequences. There are ways to watch this film that is out, even if you aren't, able to show your appreciation and monetarily pay for it. I can't tell you to do that or not do that, but I'm sure plenty of people out there will be able to figure out that you can probably get behind that HBO if you know someone in America, or there are other ways, of course. So that's not on my head as far as I'm concerned. That's on the studio's head. So the plot of Mortal Kombat 2021 is slightly different to the original. You've got the same tenets there of the tournament, one tournament away from the end of Earthrealm as Outworld invades, but you have some new inclusions, these strange markings that characters have that basically pick them out as the chosen ones for the tournament, which can either be passed down through lineage or by killing someone with the marking and inheriting theirs. And you also have the protagonist, Cole Young, a brand new character created for the film, who rests in the former category. He has born with this strange birthmark, which he then will go on to learn grants him exclusive access to the murder tournament that is Mortal Kombat. Steve, let's start with you. What do you think of the plot setup for this film? And sort of the new introductions there.
I feel like they could have called this Combat Begins. Like, this just feels like very much a prequel film to anything that will occur in the video games. Even though certain characters die that may or may not be meant to. I suppose we're trying to dance around spoilers a little, but it's okay. Like, those opening minutes hook you pretty hard, I would say.
Yeah.
As a general setup, though, with the whole, Deus Ex Machina tattoos and the nature of said power giving them, I want to say, plot armor. There is a term I don't like to use, but it's very Mary Sue-y. Especially, we'll get into his character later. Overall, it's okay, I think.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, really, because it is somewhat true to the games, but then it just sort of bolts some extra stuff onto it.
That's the thing. We've got audience identification character or something in a franchise this old feels a bit strange to me.
Yeah, for sure. It's a weird one. Yeah, I've definitely got some points to make about that. I think it mostly works fine. It's the means to an end. It didn't overly offend me or anything like that. I wasn't off-put by it. It gave us sort of a different entry point, I suppose, which is fine. James, what do you think of the plot setup?
Well, for starters, it's better than the original movie, the 1995 movie. I could follow it better. It was a lot easier to follow. No, that's the wrong words. It felt more put together. Like, there's a lot more robustness to it, because you got glimpses into different worlds, and not even just Outworld, but other ones too, which gave you kind of a nice feel about where this franchise could go. And every character felt standalone. I'll talk about characters later on, because there's one I didn't really like in particular, right? But yeah, the plot is it's not too complicated, but it's robust. Like, it makes sense. It made a little bit more sense, and they took it a little bit more seriously, which some people may not have liked because it's Mortal Kombat, and that's fair, to be honest, right? But I did like it, because it was like, they're trying to spin it in a new way, and they're trying to make it a bit more real. There's the two famous words, dark and gritty, which is where they tried to go with this one, and they didn't try, they did it pretty good. And then towards the end, it turned into this is a Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah, it it has a like an amping up kind of pace to it. It definitely transforms as it goes, because like just the opening scenes for this film is sort of whiplash from 95 to this. I love it. Like, it's really cool to see actual lore from the series on screen now that obviously we've got the benefit of all this time being put into it and stuff. Get to see this, like, it's just like a really cool showdown between the Sub-Zero and Scorpion characters in the past. And it's funny because we were talking obviously about the previous film and how those characters didn't have the legitimacy, they didn't have the level of importance and stuff like that they've been afforded over time. And immediately we go into this film, these are the central points of the story, these characters and their history, and that's how it opens, which I really liked.
It gave you, like that opening scene, I knew what was going to happen. I think we all knew it was going to happen. Yeah. Because it's just typical Hollywood, right? Where something happy is happening. Everyone's happy, we're having a great time, and I was like, oh, something bad's gonna happen to this person. Right. Sure. The thing are we're allowed to talk about spoilers, right? Because people should probably have watched the movie if they're
I would say I mean spoiler warning now, I guess, if you haven't watched the film.
The thing, all right, spoiler warning. I know. It's very difficult, and has been for years, to show, child death on screen, right? You don't see it, right? But you see a child that's lost their life, and like it is still a compelling moment. I was expecting her to die,
right?
I was not expecting that child to die, right? And it made me go, oh, okay, they are not pulling punches, right? And then like within like 2 minutes, we get that badass fight, right? With Hanzo Hasashi, right? It was so good. I was like, yeah, I'm in. Okay, it's got me now. I'm gonna watch it again and again. But that was a great scene to start this movie out. It gave me so much lore. It made me care about this character, and it made me really dislike Bihan. That's precisely, they did it. They did good there.
Kelsey, what do you think of the general plot line and the opening, since we're talking about it?
So let me just kind of preface what I'm going to say with that I did really, 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 really like this film, because over the course of the next 30 minutes or whatever, I might sound quite critical, but plot-wise, it's better than the original. However, I think it has some of the same issues in that the most kind of plot explaining it does is in that first scene, the title cards that follow, and then Sonya Blade has like a plot dump at one point. Outside of that, the plot is quite thin. It's definitely not as shallow as the first film, but I did feel like, again, if you don't know what Mortal Kombat is, you might be a bit confused. There isn't a tournament in this film. They sort of talk about the tournament, but there isn't one. The antagonists kind of say, "Screw the tournament. We're just gonna go kill them all." But yeah, just to kind of bring it back to the start, that opening scene is so good. It's the build up of tension. It did not feel like a Hollywood popcorn film at all. And then they just have this awesome fight. It's so good. I loved it. I think the film in general suffers a lot. The plot suffers, I should say, because of fan service. The film caters to fans in like a really big way. Crams lots of characters in. So many references, like references to the series and things that people will go, like things like the leg sweep and stuff like that. And it focuses on that fan service quite a lot, rather than developing the plot or adding many twists and turns. That's fine. It's fine, because I think the film makes up for it in a lot of other ways. Excuse me. So yeah, it's a little bit shallow. The plot is better than the first film. I think personally, I would have preferred if they'd kind of said that, okay, we're going to do a new Mortal Kombat trilogy, and they had and this first film was kind of almost completely set in that opening scene, or at least more time was spent there because it was so good. And I think more setup to sort of then carry over into 2 more films could have been really, really good. Because as I say, the film suffers because of a lot of characters get sidelined, and we'll get onto characters in a bit. But yeah, it's a long way to a short point. It's better than the first one. But I do think it suffers because of fan service. Yeah, and I thought the ending was, I mean, I know we're going to talk about spoilers, but just quickly. So plot of the film, this new character, Cole Young, goes on, his arc is fine. It's good, but it's good up until the end because he's about to have this fight with Sub-Zero, and then Scorpion just kind of shows up and does it for him, which I was just like, really? Like, it's at one point they're sort of fighting, and then he's just in the background, just like punching the ice to get his wife out. And I thought, I kind of felt a bit sort of cheated. I've kind of bought into this new character. I can see what they're doing here. And then we've got to the end where he's going to take down Sub-Zero, and then he just doesn't. And that was sort of a big issue with me. Yeah, that's it. I suppose that's kind of what I think about the plot. It's fine, but again, very simple. Pacing, I suppose. Actually, pacing is another issue I had. That opening is so good, and then the rest of it is just like 90% action. I would have liked a few more quiet moments to just kind of breathe and talk about the lore, but they shove all of that lore into Sonya Blade's. We've been doing all this research for 7 years, and there's this ancient tournament, blah, 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 blah. So if you don't know what Mortal Kombat is, hopefully you do now after this little speech she's given. A bit more depth would have been good, but it was good. It was fine.
I've definitely got some points about sort of pacing in the ending to get to, so remind me to get to that. But Adam, what do you think of the general plot?
I would definitely echo Mr. KDB in this one. It's the opening feels like a bit of a bait and switch to me. It opens up really strong, kind of period piece. It looks the cinematography is beautiful in that kind of opening 7 minutes, and then it kind of just turns into almost 1995 Mortal Kombat. Very basic story. I think it tries to be too fantastical, which sounds a little weird because it's Mortal Kombat, but like the whole Kano Eye thing being like some sort of magical power that you unlock when you have one of these marks. Right. It was just like, really? You got to do that? Like, why can't he just have a laser eye? It's Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm. There is, no, sorry, go on. I'll definitely get into that, but go on.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say about it. It was, for me, it was just as serviceable a film as the original Mortal Kombat with updated effects, and it looked a lot nicer. But other than that, I mean, not one part of it made me be like, oh, I have to talk about this movie.
Yeah,
and not in a bad way. It was fine.
I think the structure of the plot is fine. It's not exactly like it's unique. Train and find your inner powers, and then fight the bad guys. But as has been pointed out, there wasn't a tournament in this really at all. At least the 95 film did have a few fights early on that were part of the tournament before it all kind of sort of falls to pieces a little bit, which is a little bit strange. In terms of the magic markings and arcana, which grants you this power that you can unlock, I thought that was actually quite an interesting explanation for the sort of supernatural effects that some of the characters can have, but it does work better for some characters and then not at all for others. As you just pointed out, Kano probably should have had a science fiction reason for his eye, and maybe work around him losing his mark or something, some other way, and coming back with a souped up face or whatever. Mostly also because, and we'll get to characters, but Jax's superpower, I guess, is have bigger robot arms, which is kind of wonderfully coincidental because if he didn't have like weedy robot arms, then he wouldn't be able to use his power at all.
How much would it suck if your power was just like upgrade your own like robot body parts and you'd never lost your arms?
Exactly.
You would just be like, oh, great.
That one doesn't make sense. Like fireballs and ice and stuff like that. Okay, sure, fine. Shooting pink rings at people. I kind of like that as an explanation, but for some characters, they didn't need to have them the plot could have spent a little bit more time in there. And in terms of the tournament, since we've done all the spoilers a little bit, what I would say this film almost needs is a final fight between Cole and some other character, whether that's Shang Tsung or what, and they outline that as, well, we're the two, maybe not surviving, because that means you have to kill off all the other characters, but then they all, well, whatever. They all kind of get evaporated into non-life at the end. But you needed a final, we are the two last standing, this is the fate of it all kind of fight, because it did just sort of fall apart when you got to sort of the MMA cage, and you forget that it's about a tournament, which hasn't actually started yet, but nonetheless. No.
Yeah, that really bummed me out as well. And I was really expecting Cole to I was expecting like the spirit of Scorpion to inhabit him, and that's what was going to happen when he finally got his power. I thought he was going to have his lineage, like he would be Scorpion. 100%. And it would be like that dude living through him, and then it was just like a weird gold bodysuit.
KDB's right. They did almost kind of imply that was going to be the case with the mirror scenes and stuff. But
I would have been fine with that if he just kind of appeared very briefly at the end, and then sort of to just guide him, and then he became Scorpion,
the new Scorpion.
That's where I thought it was going the entire time.
Exactly. That's why
it's a shame because it's arguable, can you have your cake and eat it too? Because I love the beginning of the film, and as James said, he knew where it was going, but I knew where it was going because I know sort of the history of those characters. Even though I'm not a Mortal Kombat lore buff, I know that that's how it goes, and that's how Scorpion gets his powers and stuff like that. So that's lore accurate, and then I guess the end of the film wouldn't be. But I mean, for the sake of the film, it's not a bad idea to go off in your own way. I know some video game fans throw up their arms and say all video game films have to do their own thing and it's bad. That's not always the case. If you're setting up like your own little universe here, and this is its own separate pocket universe, they could have done something different. Steve, you tried to be a bit spoiler-free there, but now we've sort of been let off the leash. So what do you think of the wider plot?
It feels like fan fiction. Cole's entire arc. I mean, I am the son or grandson of Scorpion, and he is going to help me beat Sub-Zero. Also, my power is armor, and no one can kill me. When I say it like that, it's not very charitable, is
original
it?
Character.
I will kill Goro in 2 hits. That's kind of It's a bit Plus, he looks like an extra from Warcraft.
Are you talking about Goro?
Yeah,
he looks like a WoW character.
It's okay. I was really digging it when it was Crouching Tiger Extreme Violence at the start. That bit is awesome. I would watch an entire film of just Hanzo and Bihan kicking the out of each other. I'm sorry for the swearing. This is an extreme film, allegedly. But that sets a tone that the film never keeps up after that.
Yep.
The closest cool stuff we get is it's still Goro getting maimed, isn't it? Everyone else is kind of meh. Scorpion annihilates 7 or 8 ninja dudes with that kunai through the head and the chest, and then the only other brutal stuff is a key blast through a chest, a gnome to the eye. It's not quite the same. It's just. It's weirdly trying to reference stuff like KDB said with the kick sweep bit, which we've all done on Mortal Kombat 2, don't lie.
Is that the only move you know?
Yeah, exactly. And they even get Hero Cole to do the classic Mortal Kombat move, the uppercut. Everyone's got one.
Dad, use your uppercut.
Yeah. It was funny the first time.
I'm not gonna lie, I was a little hyped when Scorpion does appear and does basically go, now you're mine, I'm gonna get over here, and they have a fight. But until then, it just feels like Power Rangers, but it's taking itself way too seriously this time. Like, if the original film is inoffensive because it's kind of dumb, goofy, this is like, no, we're serious, for real. Also, Sonya says she's special forces. She could just be a crazy person.
I thought that as well.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that really bugs me is Jax goes off to stop Sub-Zero from killing Cole, gets maimed, and then left somewhere where he is. Sonya asks, "Where's Jax?" And then they leave it at that, and they bugger off into the salt mines of God knows where with Kano. Don't even look for him.
Meanwhile, Liu Kang goes all the way there to pick up Jax's body and then come back as well.
Raiden appears clearly got the same voice director as Kitana in the previous version, and just goes lightning shield. And Shang Tsung also probably has the same voice direction. Cabal's kind of cool. Like when he turns,
Cabal is pretty awesome.
Who is that? Is that I recognise the voice? I don't know if anybody knows who that is.
Daniel Nelson.
I don't know that name.
Oh, sorry. Damon Harriman was the voice of him.
I don't know.
I think, if they're doing a Command and Conquer live action movie, there's your Nod Troopers right there. There you go, right? But no, the villains were okay to a degree. The bad guys who are there just to fight, like Sub-Zero, has a very distinct air of menace about them. Cabal as the slimy dude, and Kano as the obvious. When are you going to betray us then? It would have been more of a outstanding thing to see him not betray the team.
Yep.
Yeah. As for the heroes, Liu Kang seems almost like milquetoastly quiet in this film in comparison to most other iterations of the character.
Stay off my boy.
I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not saying he's bad, James. I'm just saying that they backseated him for a new character whose power is armor.
James, what do you think of the characters then in that case?
Man, you guys really went in, huh? It's like
I was thinking of James that entire time.
Holy crap. Man, I love this movie. Y'all can suck it.
I did too.
For what it's worth, I really enjoyed it as well, to be fair.
In terms of the characters, man, the coolest bit happened. I wouldn't say this earlier on, but I'll let you finish. Like, Kung Lao destroying Nitara with his
hat. That's the best bit.
It was so good. Like, I would have liked to have seen more of Nitara, but like it was like, oh man, that was so cool. Like, because I like the just quickly, I like the kind of the build up to that, because like Kung Lao is just like this very like self-assured person, and rightfully so. You see him being being a badass, and then you get to see him being one, right? It's just it is unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen him at least fight
Shang Tsung
a little bit, rather than just get his soul sucked out.
Yeah,
like that would have been nice to see. But at the same time, I did feel a little bit there, like with Liu Kang and him. Like I really wanted Liu Kang to get there, but Cabal is. I love that character too, guys. I like him. He was cool. Like, and he was just like, yeah, I know what you're doing, but I'm going to keep you here, because my master's killing one of your. I don't know really. Are they, in terms of the lore, how are they connected to each other? Because they seem very, very intimate.
Who, Cabal and Shang Tsung?
Liu Kang and Kung Lao.
Cousins.
Generally, Liu Kang is the master, and then Kung Lao is the student. Although occasionally it's flipped around.
Okay.
Like depending on which version of Kung Lao it is, because there's like the original Kung Lao, and then there's like Liu Kang's protege Kung Lao, and something like that.
Yeah.
He calls him cousin in the film, doesn't he?
He calls him cousin and brother, I think, at different times.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, those things can be used. Like, you can use those two, descriptors for someone.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like you can do that. So like for sure. Yeah. Like, and then there's also Kano just like punching. It made me laugh so much, but it was a good positive laugh, because he just punches through Reptile's chest and then brings it out. Kano wins, and I was like, "Oh, yeah. I love you." Like, but then he got a little bit annoying, because he's all the time, and you're gonna bleep me here. Put that down on the notes. He's constantly saying, "You f***ing idiot," and I'm like, "Can you stop saying that?" you said it like 15 times. Stop saying it. Like it's a couple times is cool, but yeah, it was starting to get on my nerves a bit. In terms of all the other guys, I'm going to go down the list. So, and I was going to talk about one of the characters I didn't like, which was Cole Young, because he seemed like a pretty blank canvas. And I know what they were trying to go with. It's just like, he didn't have really a personality. I wanted, his family had more of a personality than he did. And they were barely in the film. I wanted to know more about his daughter. I want to know, why she's so important. Why, when she put that strength bracelet on him, I wanted that to be a big moment. He looks down at the strength bracelet. I know Sub-Zero crushes it, but it's like, I wanted him to look down at that at one point and then like find the strength within him other than being beaten to a pulp. And then,
I thought, just before you, Karen, I was just going to say, I thought that was going to be more important than it was, because immediately you kind of saw where this film was going, and it's yellow and black, and I was like, okay, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And it didn't really turn out to be too much. You're right.
Yeah. And then, like, going down the list, like, yeah, I feel that there could have been more characters of Cole Young, because I like his character. Like, I like his skill, his arcana, as they call it, in this film. And I kind of like that plot, but at the same time, like, you could have easily, like, Jax could have become an engineer and just made his own arms. Kano could have, I don't know, fell into a vat of lasers. I'm not sure. But, I did like also and I don't normally like this kind of plot, but I liked Sonya Blade's plot of just being nothing and then achieving, like, kicking the butt of Kano and then achieving that champion status that we kept being reminded of throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
And I also kind of like Raiden, because I've always seen Raiden as this kind of passive. But then again, he is also a god, and I'm a DM for D&D, so gods are typically passive and don't do an awful lot, right? And he did that in this. He didn't do an awful lot. He just stood by, was a little bit passive-aggressive, and then put a shield up, But yeah, probably the star of the show for me, though, other than that first scene with Hiroyuki Sanada and Joe Taslim, Ludi Lin. I love this boy. Like, I could look at him all day. Like he looks great, right? And I could watch him fight all the time. I loved seeing him fight. And the effects in this movie, also fantastic. We'll go over that later on. I would have liked to seen Melina kind of do more stuff as well.
Everyone would have.
Yeah, like, I mean, she was like teased, and she was given like 5 minutes of screen time.
Front and center of the marketing, and she says like 3 words.
Yeah, like I think maybe General Raiko is even more.
Like, it's not until she gets angry and splits her own mouth open. Until then, she's like she's got jam down her face.
Yeah, and then do you know what? In a stark contrast to the 1995, Goro was crap because he was made of CGI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
James,
it was very.
We saw Warcraft together, right? I am not crazy.
He looks like an uncorrupted orc from Warcraft,
and not even a good one.
Yeah, no, he's just doesn't look great. It's like that's that CGI versus practical effects argument again, right? It's like you had your dark scene, right? You could have put a practical effect in there, right? You could have made it. You don't need to make him 12 foot tall. Just make him taller than Cole Young. Lord of the Rings did it. I mean, I am talking about a multi-$100 billion like film compared to this one, but yeah. And I did like, though, like I think that fight with Kano and the reptile was pretty cool. But yeah, when it got towards the end, also the choreography started to fall off for me.
Interesting.
Yeah, like there were specifically, I liked the references. I liked the jump up. Is a Nova move you like? I like the references to it. But there was some and it was specifically when either Sonya or Jax was involved. I was like, they doesn't seem like they put as much work in terms of the martial arts as everybody else has. Even
Right.
Like Lewis Tanner's Cole Young doesn't at some points. Like I don't believe him. But as soon as Hiroyuki Sanada or Joe Taslim come on the screen, right, or Ludi Lin, I was like, yes, I'm in. Like I just want to watch those three for the entire movie, like do martial arts because it's so pretty to watch on the screen. Like it is an art form. It's meant to be, you know.
His body, by the way, Ludi Lin, is ridiculous. Like the amount of vasculature like he had was insane. Like obviously completely built for look and not necessarily actual strength, but my God, it was ridiculous. I was really happy to see Kung Lao in this film. I do like his character design, and yeah, he got to do the amazing fatality move, and even better. As a stupid nerd, I was very happy. Yeah, okay, it would have been nice to see that character do more. But he says, flawless victory. And he actually got one this time, unlike the 95 film, where when somebody said that, I was like, that wasn't a flawless victory, he got hit in the head, or something like that. You know.
Ref, where's the ref?
Exactly. Like, they actually did it right this time. Yeah, I agree with you on most of these points about characters. I loved Sonya's sort of little arc, especially the fact because the next time you see her, she's already sorted out her arcana. She was just ready for it. Like, she got the mark, boom, suddenly she's got her power. I actually quite like that touch. Rather than have to spend time getting it. Perhaps for pace reasons they did that, but it actually worked for her character that she was just ready to inherit that power.
Because she's like always ready, right?
Yeah,
like
she's the driving force.
Yeah, she's like the most
forces.
organized out of all of them. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, I was just saying she's special forces. She knows what she's doing.
She's not just a crazy person who lives in a caravan. But yeah, the major thing that I agree with you is, yeah, Kano, like, at the beginning, when you first introduced him, you're like, man, this guy's the shining star of the movie. And then about 30 minutes later, I'm like, shut up. Like, every scene was just, like, yeah, okay, like, maybe he's just out-acting everyone or something. I don't know. Maybe he was just working the script better. But it was kind of like, I'd like to see other characters use this time to grow. So that when this character is inevitably out of the picture, like he was going to be, that the rest of this sort of built-up team didn't feel incredibly just limp, which they, surprise, kind of did, in contrast to the 95 film, where all these characters are bouncing off of each other. This group didn't quite have the same camaraderie feeling for me. But overall, I thought the casting was pretty solid. Mostly pretty happy with all of that. Cole is a fine window to the world that I don't think we really needed, because there are plenty of other characters that didn't know about the tournament that you could have used or whatever. But then again, there's probably too many characters in this film to give everybody the right amount of time. It is a little bit too jam-packed. Adam, what do you think of the characters and the casting?
I would pretty much echo everyone else here. Most of them were fine for the most part. It's funny because none of them are overly, memorable. Scorpion, I love that actor. I wish he had more to do in this movie.
Yeah,
I wish it had been about him.
Yeah.
Sub-Zero was great. I mean, a lot of that was effect driven. The actor didn't have to do too much. But yeah, I mean, Cole Young was a bit of a miss for me. Mortal Kombat has such a selection of characters already that we, like you said, we could have had almost any one of them as our eyes to this sort of event.
Mm-hmm.
He was obviously like the blank canvas human protagonist character that we're supposed to follow, but it just seems so flat when you know about all the other characters, and he didn't really have much. Excuse me. He didn't have much.
That's how you feel about him.
Yeah, he didn't have much. Exactly. I yawned because he just had nothing going on, and even his like quote unquote power, his arcana was boring.
Mm.
It was like some armor.
He looked like crap Aquaman to me.
Yeah, Aquaman.
Which says a lot.
He did look like that. Yeah, it was disappointing for that. I pretty much enjoyed most of the other characters. Cabal was really cool. I like what they did with him. I like the attention to detail, as it were, for those guys.
Mm.
But I mean, overall, it was fine. It was less memorable to me. Like, I remember less about this than watching the 95 version, which I would say is a worse film than this one, but it's more memorable for it.
Steve, what do you think of the characters?
I think I've already nutshelled it, haven't I? Raiden's boring. Liu Kang's barely
Raiden
in it.
was in it. I forgot.
You
I
know,
actually did forget. Yeah.
if a character is iconic, they either get no screen time, no development, or the Kano, and they stay around so long that they annoy everybody. It's weird. Like, and the best part of the film is literally the two ninjas kicking the crap out of each other. And even then, we've still got Plot Armor Boy and his tonfas. It's weird though, because I can feel like you can just see a production, you can tell their heart is in the right place.
Yeah,
that's the thing that gets me. Although Shang Tsung and Raiden might as well not have been in this film, and they're pivotal parts of it as well.
I was expecting a fight with Shang Tsung. Like,
the closest we get is someone not finishing a sentence while being electrocuted.
Right. And if you're going to tease a new movie, like, don't tease it with arguably one of the most boring characters in the whole franchise.
Oh, controversial.
I'll say it.
I'm with you there, Adam. I'm with you.
Good.
Which one, Shang Tsung or Raiden?
No,
at the end.
Johnny Cage.
No, Johnny Cage. Just
right.
We better go to LA. Like, you don't even need to show a picture of Johnny Cage after that.
I
Everyone knows you're talking about Johnny Cage.
Right, that was a bit too much, wasn't it? But tinfoil hat, I almost feel like when people found out there wasn't going to be a Johnny Cage in this film, that they slapped that on at the end.
If they were going to really tease it,
true.
they should have gone with, modern day Sub-Zero, not Bai Han being like a badass.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, there's more.
Kelsey, what do you think of the characters?
Yeah, I won't repeat what everybody. I think we're pretty much all on the same page. Pretty much. I'll just say a couple of things. Now, Cole, I actually don't think I minded him as much as everybody else. It just wasn't until, as I said, the end, when they had this whole build-up of movie. Well, first when he started to get his power, I was like, he got the armor, and I was like, oh, okay, that's the first stage of his power.
Yes, right.
And then, no, that was just it. So that annoyed me. And then it was that final section where he didn't get the big payoff. He was just sort of watching at the side and he did a little bit of an assist at the very end, but yeah, Scorpion stepped in. But as a character, I think it's obvious what the purpose of him was. He was this blank canvas. He was supposed to be the audience's kind of gateway into the film. And to be honest, I liked the MMA stuff just because I like MMA anyway. It sort of grounded it a little bit, and it's very sort of the moment. But I liked that. But as I said, I kind of flipped towards the end. I was like, okay, what was the point of him if he didn't even get the kind of payoff? Kano as well, I agree. He arrives and you're like, this guy's hilarious, he's great, and then he has just kind of he's worn. I was worn out with him 15 minutes later or whatever. Kung Lao is going to be a fan favorite from this film. Wish he'd had more time. Melina got shafted completely, just like Sub-Zero, and but again, we don't have the sort of argument that maybe Melina wasn't as popular outside of the films in this, in the games, like Sub-Zero and Scorpion in the first movie, because she is. I think this is why she was in the trailer a lot and why she had her own poster, and then she doesn't do much in the film. She's cool in the film, like the stuff that she does, but I was expecting a lot more. I would have liked her to live, I suppose, to be in what is going to be potentially a sequel. Then Sub-Zero and Scorpion, those the originals, if you like, they were my favorites. And like Adam said, I could have watched a whole movie with them easily. I could have watched a whole movie with them. This could have been the first film, as I said, and then we led into sort of the future and more modern day in subsequent films. Both actors were tremendous, I thought. I know a lot of the other actors didn't do, like in the original film, a lot of the actors did their own fighting, for sort of better or worse. But in this film, a lot of them didn't.
Right.
For people like Sonya Blade and sorry, I don't know the actor's name. It was Jessica something. But yeah, I know that she had sort of
like Nami.
Yeah, that's the one. I read that she didn't do any of the fighting choreography at all when she was positioned. She was cast purely for sort of her acting skill, and the acting is generally good across the board. Just as it's an ensemble film, and a lot of characters do suffer because of that, because it's an hour and 30 minutes long. So some characters you don't find out enough about them. At least I would have liked to. They could have just trimmed out maybe 4 characters and then brought more in for the sequel, I think, and we could have then spent more time with people.
I mean, there's no reason to believe that if this film does get a sequel, as it clearly wants to, that these characters won't come back, because it did almost kind of imply that death is not the end, and all these dead characters.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, their bodies were sort of absorbed and picked up, weren't they? And just quickly again, I've got to say it on Goro, like it was just terrible. Like not terrible. Terrible's the wrong word. That's really harsh. Like this movie doesn't have as big a budget as like a Marvel movie. If we're comparing it like we did when we compared to Jurassic Park, like if you think of Hulk in the Avengers films, the CG's great. It looks like he's there, but yeah, Goro just looked like a video game character in this film, which is such a shame, because the shot in the trailer looked awesome, and I was like, wow, he's going to look great. And then, yeah, he looked very, very CG, and it took me out of it. His death was cool, but spoiler alert, but death is not the end, apparently. So, but yeah, so characters, it was a bit overcrowded for me. Yeah. I would have liked to see more from lots of the characters in there. Steve made actually a really good point when he said you either get a certain treatment, it's the Kano treatment, or the sideline. I don't remember what you said, Steve, but I know it was a very good point. That summed it up really well.
You're either the main character or you're on the sidelines, unless you're Kano.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah. It is funny what you were saying about sort of like Sub-Zero and Scorpion as well. It's like they're a big pull, and they're front and center right at the beginning, and the most exciting part about the end. But yeah, in the middle, it's kind of it's a bit overcrowded. All of that between those two ending points of those two fights, it's kind of like but I want to see the ninja guys again. I loved just sort of like to bring us into visuals. Sort of the early parts of the film, when Cole is like, oh, okay, I'm going to go for ice cream, and then Sub-Zero apparates and starts throwing ice around. All that's pretty cool. I actually kind of like Sub-Zero, the serial killer. Like, there's just that shot where they're in their like caravan or house or whatever it is, little place they live, where Cole's partner, I guess it is, walks in a room and then walks back out past the door, and Sub-Zero standing in the doorway. So it suddenly made me think, man, Sub-Zero for Dead by Daylight, please. Let's.
It did have Terminator vibes, didn't it?
It really did.
There were really cool parts as well. Like there was that one part when he's like in the alleyway and he's got like the frozen mist, and then he like
went
shifts
through the door
into it. Yeah, it looked so cool.
That whole part was really cool. That kind of made me think, oh, this is gonna be really good. And I mean, cart before the horse. I'm critiquing this film a lot. We all are. I did enjoy it.
I did too. I know we're kind of like being critical of it, but it was still an enjoyable movie.
Yeah. So visuals. So for one thing, the fight scenes in this very slick, good fun to watch. Overall, I didn't have too much of a problem with any of them. Big improvement over the original, and as we said, this film does feel more like Mortal Kombat to me, based on one important factor, which is gore, and lots of it. Some of it ridiculous in that hilarious way. And the fatalities, talking about this sort of being a labour of love and made by someone who does understand the franchise, a lot of those fatalities do look like they come straight out of the most recent few video games. So I really appreciate that attention to detail. Most people touched on the CGI. I will just drop mine, and they look okay, but not much more than that. They're not going to look good 5-10 years from now. That's the problem. But the high point for me was the costume design in general, other than bad Aquaman. I think the ninjas looked especially good. The costumes were overall solid. Kung Lao is another good one as well. Raiden's costume looked good. Not that I have too much to say about the character, but he looked fine. Shang Tsung looked good as well. So visually, for me, I was pretty happy with it. Adam, what did you think of the visual design?
Yeah, I would echo that. It was good visually. Like we were just saying about like Sub-Zero's effects and stuff was really cool. The cinematography was really nice in like the opening scene as well.
Yes, definitely.
I was expecting to have a very cinematic movie after that, and it kind of didn't reach the places I wanted it to go, but it didn't look bad, and I was eternally grateful for them not doing the kind of fight filming where it's like a million jump cuts and you just don't know what's happening.
Right, 100%.
It was definitely followable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was.
If Anderson
it was
had made
what I would
this film,
expect
then...
from a film. I think that's my biggest issue with it. It's and it's like just to say it's what I expected, pretty much.
That's fair. Kelsey, what do you think of the visual design?
So this is a sort of weird one because for the most part it's pretty stellar. Like visually, it's really good. There is that contrast, as we've said, between that opening scene and the rest of the film, which is just so completely different. But whatever. But generally, the sort of look and particularly the effects, because the visual effects are a huge part of this film, and they clearly spent a lot of time, particularly trying to make Sub-Zero feel tangible. So you do feel, or at least I did, I felt cold anytime the sort of ice started to appear on the screen. It looks very, very real, really incredible stuff. They use VFX a lot to enhance, like outside of the fatalities, like the general blood in the fights and stuff, you can tell some of that blood CG, but it looks really good. Yeah. So the fights are enhanced very well by the CG. But then there is like 2 or 3 moments in the film where, to be honest, I thought there was actually some really shoddy like effects, and one is Raiden's like force field thing, which, yeah, I don't really know what was going on there. I hate to, well, actually, I don't hate to. I'd love to mention it, but I'll mention Power Rangers again. It was just like this weird, thin. I don't know. I just didn't like that. The effect looked cheap, and the way that was kind of implemented, I didn't like. Goro, I've talked about. It wasn't quite like Mummy Returns level, but it was just bad CG. Yeah. And then there was also like a really weird shot, like when Raiden did the force field, there was like a cut to his staff, and there was like this weird CG shot of the top of his staff. It's almost like it looked like a shot that was left in accidentally. It was so blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah, I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah, and
I noticed
that looked really bad, and I don't know what that was about, but anyway. But outside of those things, it looks good. I think all of the fatalities in terms of how they look really good. As good as Kung Lao's one is, it also looked the most video gamey.
Yeah.
But I did love it. Like, again, we keep saying we're being really critical, and I am, but I loved all of that, and I was sort of grinning with glee and sort of like turning away a little bit, just with sort of how crazy and violent it was. And they hung on the violence as well. Like that first fight is very real, but then when Jax gets his arms ripped off, like I was sort of like terrified for him, and the way the ice is going up the arms, and then the arms come off, and they just hold on him with no arms, and then he falls off and bounces off the piece of concrete, and they're like, we are showing you violence in this film, so strap in. And there's lots of that in there. Some of them kind of work better than others, but yeah, I preferred the cinematic look of the opening scene to the rest of the film, which is not standard. It is very high quality, and the cinematography was cool, and the fight choreography was great. Like Adam said, they don't just do loads of cuts to hide it. a lot of the martial artists obviously worked very hard to make it legit. It feels like, they definitely paid a lot of they put a lot of effort into that side of things. I watched the film on my laptop, which I don't usually do, so I don't know how it's going to all look in like 4K on a big screen. I imagine some of it is not going to look anywhere near as good, if I'm honest. The small screen probably, particularly that Kung Lao fatality, I'm not sure how that's going to look on a big screen.
Yeah, that's fair.
Some of it was a bit cartoony, but again, I let it slide because it's Mortal Kombat and it is cartoony. The fatalities are insane, and despite criticisms, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of it. Really high caliber stuff. And actually, this film was only made for 55 million. It's only 55 million, but that's a small a small budget these days, and they did really well to make it look as good as it did. It hangs with the big movies, I would say, very well.
Yeah, well said, definitely. Steve, do you agree? What was your thoughts on the visual design?
Yeah, if it's the special effects that aren't related to CGI characters and that aren't withstanding, it wasn't too bad. I'm not the biggest fan of the VAC ban shield that Raiden basically goes, "No, you're not cheating."
Yeah, exactly.
But Liu Kang's fire I thought was really good, and Sub-Zero. I'm pretty sure if there's any takeaway, probably the most convincing I've seen a person generate ice and throw another human being through it. Yeah. And that I've never had quite as much menace from snow before. The opening bit where it's a shame it cuts away from it too fast, where the snow just starts lilting and then he's stalking them. We could have done a full Terminator 2 chase sequence complete with an aqueduct if we'd have gone that far, and I would have just reveled in it. But that's by the by. Like KDB said though, with Jax's arms and things, showing that kind of level of gratuitous violence, and even in CGI Monster's defense, the reptile fight is nowhere near as obnoxious as Goro. Mainly because Reptile is cloaking in and out the entire time. But yeah, I think the reason why those fatalities look so video gamey is because they are directly homaging said fatalities, though.
Yeah.
The purpose of the film, isn't it, really? That's the main defense I have for its visual designs and things. I think definitely nails the look. Scorpion doesn't look like the old school Scorpion from MK1 to 3 anymore. He actually does look like he generally is represented in the games now.
Exactly.
And one of my favourite nods about the way they have actually done the look and stuff during the big showdown with Sub-Zero, because spoilers, he's the big bad of the film pretty much. He's the scariest fight they have. They even go so far as to hint at his future transition into Noob Saibot, where he basically casts off his armour, which is all mostly blue and padded, and he's only got the black armor underneath, which I think is kind of cool. Plus, the convincing appearances of a man who has had the absolute kicked out of him. I'm sorry, I keep swearing, but I have to enunciate that. He literally does get pounded and pulverized at the end to the point where even I feel bad for the villain.
Poor Sub-Zero.
Yeah, no, he only murdered an entire village. What a guy. But on the flip side, Goro offends me, and the cutaway shots to Outworld, where you have, I think it's the one scene we see Cabal show up and talk to Shang Tsung before he then goes, "Hey Kano, want to switch sides for a book?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure, mate." It's very cutaway and feels very we need to add some more scenes to fill this out, and it's just a CGI wasteland. Of course it's. And Outworld in the games is not a CGI wasteland. I mean, it's video games, but it's CGI. But it's not just a blank purple wasteland abyss. There is a bit more going on. I wish it could have made it a bit more interesting. So that's kind of meh. And the fact that most of the film takes place in Rocky Sand Temple, I suppose, isn't great either.
Yeah, that's true.
That's more setting, isn't it? Not so much.
Well, I mean, that's part of visual, I'd say.
Yeah, you're right. Like I said, I ain't a film critic. I'm just a yob with a silly haircut who turns up and talks on the mic.
I agree, though. The set got a little bit old by the end of that. It would have been nice to see a bit more. And then in the final sort of act of fights, they throw you around a bunch of different places. I couldn't really keep track of where we were or what was going on, to be honest. But
that felt very video gamey. I mean, that's the point, right? But okay, right, can we have a knockoff tournament? I'll take this person, and then you can have this person. We need to pad out the film with some set piece fights. Is that okay, Thunder God? Yeah, sure. I've got the bus in 5 though. Can we make it quick?
Here we are standing in front of a white curtain before we go to
the Matrix. With the guns up here.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting on. James, what do you think of the visual design of the film?
The film looked good. I loved the use of the practical effects and the CGI. But there was specifically, we've spoken about it a lot, but that scene with Sub-Zero where he pops out and plans on destroying Cole, his family maybe. But yeah, that's a combination of CGI and practical effects, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
like when you see all that snow kind of gathering, and then he just slams it down, and you can see that's all real snow and ice, and that's just been thrown at the ground, right? And it was super cool to see that. I mean, if it wasn't, then even more impressed, because it looked real.
Yeah, it really did look good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the cool moments that none of us have spoken yet, but it was a big point in the trailer where Sub-Zero draws blood out from Scorpion, turns it into a blood knife, and then stabs him with it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, and there's also the bit with Jax and him just touching the shotgun, and then just my cat is really snoring, and just freezing it as it shoots. That's why I'm watching this. Those moments are so awesome, and when captured right, yeah, as you guys have said, they have really put work into those moments, those special moments. Because as soon as that happened, I was like, oh man, Jax is not going to have a good time. Jax is, and KDB touched on kind of his, I want to talk about this a little bit, where he gets his arms kind of frozen. It's not, and it's even more brutal because you can, his arms are being frozen, but at the same time, you can see the blood seeping through the ice, and his arms just becoming ice, and just becoming these fleshy ice lumps. And it's just, and then he explodes them, and it's and the look on Jax's face at that point.
Yeah, his look.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was haunting. Right. And I was like, man, this is how you do it. Right. We look back at 1995, right? We see Sub-Zero and Scorpion, right, who were just thrown to the wayside. This movie is how you treat Sub-Zero and Scorpion with respect. Right, because they were given the respect they were due. I agree that the ending was a bit weak. Because we were, we're following this, milquetoast cookie cutter, fighter in Cole, right? And then Scorpion kind of finishes off. But at the same time, it was a really cool moment. We got to see his finisher move, his from hell move, I guess. And it was awesome CGI on that point as well.
Yeah.
Locations look fantastic. I also agree that it would have been nice not to be in that temple. I had no idea what the layout of that temple was. I had no idea. Yeah, exactly. KDB, you're mentioning the force field earlier on that Raiden put down. What was that actually surrounding?
I don't know.
Because I had, normally when that kind of stuff happens in movies or video games, you get a big zoom out panned view.
Yes.
And you get to see what it's actually doing, and you get a layout of it's protecting and stuff. But I had no idea. I was like, okay, he put a no shield up and somewhere, and yeah. Yeah, and I think we mentioned it, but Shang Tsung and could have just been out of the movie. It could have been just they could have just brought the warriors in, and then the end of the movie could have been very similar to 1995, but with Shang Tsung of him going, "I'm coming," or whatever. I don't know. I'm not movie right. But yeah, but we didn't get that. We got him. Such a bad that line at the end. So bad. I don't care about Johnny Cage. I don't care about Johnny Cage at all.
No.
Fans do, though. Fans do.
Yeah, but great. It looked fantastic. I did love, but we've spoken about Goro looked bad, and they should have just gone with practical effects. because I was not in that moment at all. You know, that was meant to be the big turnaround hook, right? That was meant to be where you look at it and you go, oh, now I mean, we knew it was going to happen anyway, but now he's finally realized his, you know, goals and destiny, and he's fighting a large 12-foot tall slab of meat, like made of CGI, you know, and it just did. I couldn't get into it. That's why, like, I just can't get into like kind of main CGI movies unless it's really well done, or it's a monster movie, you know, where it's like, it's just, yeah, I know it's Godzilla, yeah, I know that's King Kong, you know, and I know it's not real, but I just want to see monsters fight.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
But sorry, James, go on.
But in this one, like, I want to see people fighting.
Yeah.
Like, actual people fighting, martial artists fighting, because the most entertaining part of this film was seeing these people fighting and using their spells or their arcana or whatever it is they called it in this film. Yeah, I wanted to see that. But what I did see was very pretty. But you know, they could have done better with some small parts of the movie. That were important as well, actually. Like, that was a small part, but it was very important to the movie.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So the final point, as for the last one, is audio, and I feel like we're probably generally going to have less to say about this one. Generally, the soundtrack is sort of fair to middling, no major consequence. My advice would be watch the film loud if you can. It's a big, dumb action flick, so it sounds good and big and boomy, and you know, sound balance is good. Soundtrack works where it is, but it's nothing memorable. They do tease the theme at several points in the score. They don't kick it in until the end, which I thought was kind of clever. You already know, all right, okay, we're going to get it at the
clever or
moment.
Infuriating. Because every time I was like, here we go.
I know, they've got to make you wait for it until Scorpion. And the moment itself was very cool, but Adam, not a fan of that idea?
I get it. I just want to hear it.
I
know, like, I know the theme. We all know it. We've been hearing it for long. I don't need to wait for it.
What do you think of the sound in general?
I like it. It's again my biggest complaint about the whole film and everything about it is that it's just pretty much serviceable and what I expected, which isn't a bad thing. It's just it didn't do anything that wowed me, and the soundtrack was similar.
Yeah, that's fair.
The effects were probably my favorite thing about the movie. You know, like in terms of visuals, that's pretty much where I enjoyed it the most. But yeah, I feel like weird that I don't really have a lot to say about this movie as it's brand new and I just watched it, and I just kind of very generic for me. But again, not a bad thing. Enjoyable movie, just nothing special.
KDB, thoughts on the audio?
I think, yeah, the best, in terms of the sort of general sound design, great, it's fine, no complaints, really top-notch work. The music is best when it's referencing the original film. And I don't just mean the theme, like there are a couple of very just sort of generally 90s rave-style electronic music sort of sequences in there. It doesn't. I don't think there was any heavy metal in this one.
No,
not that I can remember. No, it was either sort of the classic action orchestral style or 90s style rave music, and I liked the electronic music. I loved the theme teases. It was very like, oh, here it is, like Adam says, but then it doesn't do it, and then it sort of really lays it on thick when Liu Kang is doing his kicks through the air and all that kind of stuff. And then, but what's funny is even the credits sequence where it has the updated version of the theme, it still holds off the Mortal Kombat shout until about 1 minute. I was watching, I was like, come on, do the shout, and then it finally does it, and then it breaks into like a new updated remix, which I actually really enjoyed. That new take on the theme, I'm fully into. So yeah, like sound design, great. Music, soundtrack, not as good as the first one. That's definitely a place where the first one outshines this new rebooted version, I think.
Steve, thoughts on the audio design?
It feels very, I don't know how to put this other than it feels very Marvel-y. Like
Yeah,
it's more of a
yeah.
score than an actual like here's a set of tracks to like beat people up to. Again, much like everyone else, not keen on the whole let's tease the theme but not unleash the theme. Especially for some good fights. But I think we were all a little bit more fist bumpy at the moment when bum 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 bum, get over here. Yeah, but it's just not the same without it kicking in. And the techno music and the metal music of the first iteration definitely hit harder for me. Otherwise, it does feel just a bit too like I wouldn't go out of my way and pursue this as an album. And the hit sounds and stuff, the special effects stuff, all very reasonable. Like, I can believe that's what they sound like, even if they aren't. Like, a kunai being thrown through a head or a chest. I'm pretty sure it makes that kind of sound mentally right. Foley is on par with the first film, if not a bit better. Less cheesy sound effects, but I suppose that's the nature of it. Ice. I've never heard ice crunch and crackle quite like that in a way that actually makes me feel uncomfortable, so that's good. Still kind of salty about Goro. There's not. It feels like that thing should be a lot more impactful in terms of how it sounds as well, which sounds weird because giant Mother Hubbard like him. I would have thought it'd be a bit more bass and presence to him.
Steve, sorry to jump in, but so the first film, when I was watching it this week, Goro is actually voiced by two different people. He has a speaking actor, and then he has a grunting actor. And you might know who the grunting actor is, but I was watching it and I was like, those grunts sound exactly like Bigfoot from a Goofy movie. And then I Googled it, and it is Frank Welker who does all those Disney voices and does the Decepticons in Transformers, and he does the grunts for the 95 Goro, and they are so good. And the speaking actor is good as well, but I forgot to mention that in the first part. I thought I wondered if Steve had.
He's actually voiced by two Transformers alums now. Kevin and Michael Richardson is the voice of Bulkhead and a few other characters. And obviously, Frank Welker is Megatron, Soundwave, a few others. I think Welker is like voice god though. He's done voices.
Absolutely.
For, like,
if you love something, he's done a voice for it, pretty much.
Yeah, like all across Disney, and then just general animation and things like that. But yeah, the grunts were. At first, I thought it was they just lifted it from a Goofy movie, but because I've seen that film a lot, like people know it's probably my favorite Disney movie. And
that's great.
Yeah.
Because KDB has fantastic taste, and especially in Disney films, I do not have a bias, and at all think it's also the best Disney film.
There you go, folks. There's a reference you didn't expect on a Mortal Kombat podcast.
We see eye to eye, okay?
Did Goro speak in this new one?
No, he doesn't speak.
No, he didn't. Yeah.
No, he just smash. Yeah. James, what do you think of the audio to round us out?
Audio, in terms of the sound design, great. Like, yeah, as Steve said, like the ice really makes you feel uncomfortable. I've never felt uncomfortable about ice before. It's like, but yeah, just how sadistic Sub-Zero was with it really made me afraid of it. Like in those moments where you would see Sub-Zero in his quote lair, it felt horror movie. Like, I felt literal, like pun intended, chills down my spine, right? But it was super cool. Like, and that was mainly because, a lot of it was because of the sound that was used. This is a score film. It isn't a soundtrack film,
right?
Like, but there was a particular moment where I was like, "Oh, this is so cool! This is great sound. This is great music." And it was that moment again with the snow, him generating the snow and then forcing down the ice. There was a particular hook there that really brought me into that moment, and I was really, because music can really ramp up the tension, and they did it really really well there. But like Steve said earlier on, I will likely put some of this Mortal Kombat 2021 music on my non-DMCA friendly playlist for my D&D games, because especially that moment, because it was so tension building. And also the music that was in his lair. But other than that, I wouldn't use it just to regularly listen to.
No, for sure.
Because it's meant for this film, and they did well with it. But yeah, they were clearly going for that superhero kind of aesthetic rather than rather than what the original film was, which was go a little bit bonkers with it and be like just give us good music. Not to say that the score isn't good music, but it's a score based on the moments in the film.
Right, 100%. They both achieve their own goals, I would say, which are completely different things. Right, let's round it out then with the final opinion on Mortal Kombat 2021. How does it compare to the original film and such like? What's your final verdict? Let's start with Steve.
Oh, the Rambler. Let's get him out of the way first, huh? Okay.
Well, I'm just curious because you seem quite down on it.
I'm fairly like as someone who went into this with no expectations. Okay, I haven't watched any of the trailers. I'm a reasonable Mortal Kombat fan. Like I've been keeping up with the lore and the reboot stuff, but I'm not like, oh, they did this character wrong, and therefore I'm going to write it off entirely.
Yeah.
If you can enjoy a bad Marvel film, you'll be fine here. Like I would say, this is Marvel's Combat, and I don't mean that in any disrespect. It's got that kind of level of humor, just a little bit more violence. The things that get me are things that kind of bother me about its narrative that I tend to know about in the lore, but again, I can still pass on and write off. There's just the small caveat that I have no idea why Sub-Zero was such an absolute swine. He just was. And Cole literally does feel like we need an author insert character here. Like it feels fan fiction-y as all hell.
Yeah.
CGI bashing aside, the fights are cool. Scorpion and the Sub-Zero fight is a standout both times at the opening and the end. I would say if you give me the choice between this and the original, I would still prefer the original, but I am heavily entrenched in my nostalgia, and I will fully admit that this is probably a film built with the audience in mind, with the heart in the right place.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, especially with that last point. I think that this isn't going to set the world on fire. I don't think it's going to be punching up to the heights of, as I mentioned earlier, Sonic the Hedgehog or Detective Pikachu. Even if it was released at a different time when we weren't under various confusing restrictions about things that are, affecting how much money a film takes in. But it's my assumption that the good majority of the Mortal Kombat fan base will really enjoy this and will be impatiently, probably waiting for the sequel now, already talking about what that could be. And I would happily watch a sequel if they...
There's already a sequel you can watch.
No, I don't want to watch that one. I think this film might be better than the original. I think its pacing's better. It's got more meat to it. Admittedly, it's half an hour longer. And despite the fact that there is no Mortal Kombat tournament, because it has better fights and the gore and stuff like that, I think it's just a better demonstration of what Mortal Kombat is and should be, and especially as Steve pointed out, what it is right now as well, in terms of sort of like the way they portray the characters and the way they're costumed and such. Big dumb fun, which is exactly what it should be. If your Metacritic scores of 50 out of 100 and stuff is the true average, can agree with that. I mean, that's not how film, critics and film reviewers go this day. Everyone wants a 7 out of 10 to be an average. This is a average to good fun action movie. Visually stunning, plot's a little bit, but not that important, all things considered. James, what are your final thoughts on the 2021 Mortal Kombat?
If I was going to give this film a rating on IMDb, I would give it a 6.6 out of 10.
It's very specific and very evil.
I did really enjoy watching the movie. It was a lot of fun. I'll watch it again. I think it'll be even more fun to watch with friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like you do the Leonardo DiCaprio point meme, oh, that's the guy,
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it much during this, but stop beating, the dead horse. Bring in Shao Kahn, please. Like we keep hearing about him, right? And then we never see him in a film.
Watch Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Nope.
Stop.
But no, I definitely will because I definitely like torture. But Yeah, bring him in. You know, I mean, he wasn't even mentioned in this film. You know, but I mean, you know, Shang Tsung is not the end all, right? He's not the big boss. Shao Kahn is, so bring him in. But yeah, I like the movie. I'll keep watching it. I was really entertained by it. If you want an entertaining fight movie with a lot of gore, like, watch this movie because it is really, really fun. But don't watch it with your kids. Probably, maybe not, because you know there's a lot of blood and you know somebody's arms get exploded and someone gets split in half. So you know
somebody gets killed with a garden gnome.
Somebody gets killed with a garden gnome. Yeah.
Adam, what are your final thoughts on this film?
I think that this movie is, if you took the 95 Mortal Kombat and like brought it up to date to 2021, this is what you'd end up with. It's very funny that way, which maybe sounds weird. Maybe you understand what I'm trying to say, but
yeah, yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Right, it was enjoyable. It's what I expected from it. It pretty much showed me what it had from the kind of trailers, I feel like. But then it's kind of an action-y film, and it's not a giant budgeted film and stuff. So it was enjoyable to watch, and I will probably end up watching it again at some point. I don't know when exactly, but I would be willing to sit through it another time, so it can't be that bad. All of your complaints are null and void because you haven't watched Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I would say that. If you want Shao Kahn, get your ass over to Mortal Kombat Annihilation. You can see Vin Diesel light as Shao Kahn.
Oh boy.
If you want to see a hip Raiden with short bleach blonde hair, go to Mortal Kombat Annihilation. You'll see the funnest, hippest Raiden there is.
Oh boy. Kelsey, your final thoughts on Mortal Kombat 2021?
So, obviously, as we keep saying, we've been very critical. So now, with that all that context of my criticisms out of the way, put to the side, accepting this film for what it is, and actually, I think Adam made a really good point. It is an updated version of the 95 one with modern production value standards and all this kind of stuff. That's what it is. So all the criticisms aside, I definitely certainly prefer this to the original. This to me feels like this is what a Mortal Kombat film should be. It's got, you just need to have the violence and fatalities, and as sort of shallow as that is to say, I think you need that, and this film has it sort of in droves. So you have to give it credit for that. I honestly, I know you mentioned Detective Pikachu, but this is probably the best video game movie ever made, and Silent Hill is up there for me. Detective Pikachu is up there, but I just think in terms of fun and what I got out of this movie, this is the most enjoyable one. I can see myself watching this definitely more than one more time. I'm certainly going to watch it again with my wife, and yeah, I would really like to see a sequel. The bait and switch at the start did annoy me. I thought, wow, this is going to be a cinematic, sort of very classy but violent Mortal Kombat film, and it was not that. The opening was that, the rest of it wasn't. Yeah, criticisms aside, great. Really loved it. Like, had so much fun. I laughed a lot. I smiled a lot. I got the references. So much fan service. You know, but it's probably not going to win any awards. It's not, but I don't think it's supposed to.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. No, totally. Yeah. No, that's good. That's quite a bold statement, but it's, glad to hear it. And who knows, if they do a sequel to this, maybe we'll do a round 2 and we'll watch both of the sequel films. Who knows, right? Well, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors and our Patreons once again. Support the show for as little as $1 a month to help us create more bonus content like this one over at patreon.com/FA Spray Pod. You can also join the Discord server to get in touch with members of the team and our community, discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's being recorded. You can find a link to the server, as well as our Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, and YouTube, and more at faspraypod.com. In our next bonus episode, we look to Nintendo for something to perhaps alleviate all this darkness and gloom and instead find ourselves in the shadow of a particularly scary moon when we cover The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify and iTunes, and if you enjoy the show, please do leave us a review where you can. It helps spread the word. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of us individually. I'm at Cyniac_123, Steve is at FBSteveWasTaken, Adam is at Advic01, James is at MoistOwler0FF, and Kelsey is at K_D_B_. And finally, thank you for listening, and have a good week.
He's forgot to set his clocks forward.
3
weeks ago.
Oh, I was going to say.
Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
You know, James, most of the time he's living on Canadian time, so...
He's having some kind of weird Mortal Kombat fever dream right now.
It's entirely possible, because I was watching him stream yesterday and he said, yeah, I might watch it for a second time before I go to sleep. So,
nice.
Yeah, probably. Maybe he's having a dream. He's the descendant of insert Kombat character here.
Oh, we got some issues to do with that.